This story begins with a voice communicating with the citizens of that city. It mentions that at that exact moment, countless deaths and mass murders were happening across almost the entire country, including in the provinces of Seoul and Gyeonggi. The scene then shifts to a seemingly injured man begging others not to come near him. It was possibly a rebellion. However, something as terrible as that could not yet be called one. Time passes again, and that voice urges the citizens not to leave their homes and to lock their doors completely. For that reason, it was better to stay inside, no matter what. The government promised to do its best to handle the situation as carefully as possible, but it was obvious that this could not be true. The scene then cuts to another location where a soldier commands others not to rest and instead just to shoot. As a result of all this, a catastrophe ensued. This is why the world was now completely out of order. Once again, the scene shifts to another place, introducing an unknown person. This person, in the meantime, seemed to be punching one of those monsters, and with great flair was also smoking a cigarette, claiming that this was just another monster field, and if they were going to fight them, they should do it all at once because they didn't have much time. Besides, they were the ones inside that field, and because of this, they were doing their best to fight and survive. The scene then cuts to another place with a man thinking that he really didn't want to die. Thus, at that same moment, he begins to scream. The guy next to him notices the situation. As a result, he ends up shooting his companion. Next, the scene shifts to another person thinking he was doing all of this to escape this nightmare, and also to have the opportunity to live like a normal human being. Shortly after, the scene cuts to a building at night. A man seems to approach a door and appears very nervous. As he introduces himself, he says his name is Kim, and he is a researcher at the Department of Defense. He thinks he never imagined he would meet someone from the National Intelligence Service. Shortly after, a group of people starts analyzing his equipment. They state that he is ready to go, and so they send him inside. The door opens and a group of people awaits him. The man observes the situation and remains very nervous. He thinks that one of them was the president's brain named Han. Another was his right hand, whose name was Yang. The third person was someone who had led 3 presidents into that profession and was named Yang. Moreover, he couldn't believe he was meeting all these people. Shortly after, the man suggests starting the interview quickly. Kim says he will give a brief overview of the project. He begins to discuss a ship located 8 years ago by the Coast Guard. Another man interrupts, saying they don't need an overview. He suggests they watch what Kim prepared in a video. Faced with the situation, Kim has no choice but to agree. He takes out a flash drive and says he will show the video. He states that it was an unprecedented discovery in history. Kim inserts the flash drive and presses play on the video. Everyone is very surprised by what they see. The creatures in the video could be called zombies. They decide to derive the project's name from the ship where the zombies were found. The ship was named 82, and so the project was called Zombie-Apocalypse 82. The scene cuts to a flashback 3 months earlier. A man appears at a small store and calls the waitress. He asks her to hand something over to him. Meanwhile, news on the television reports a massive explosion. The explosion supposedly occurred on the border of Georgia and Russia. A group of people seem to ignore the news and only wants to drink something. Another man comments that all that military fuss wasn't necessary. He says that if they weren't elite military students, they wouldn't be there. The scene cuts to another guy muttering about the noisy thugs. He questions why they were so proud of themselves. Another man mentions that it was Jinwoo's enrollment day. He suggests ignoring everything, at least for that day. The guy agrees, saying that if something went wrong, it would be the worst day for Jinwoo. He decides not to intervene to avoid complications for his friend. On the television, a group of idols sings a song. People start discussing which of the 2 singers was more beautiful. Another man asks the boy which girl he preferred. He replies that both were perfect. However, he chooses Zuma as his favorite. An uproar starts in the store when a man confronts the waitress. He questions how she would take responsibility for staining his colleague's clothes. He demands compensation for the psychological damage. For that reason, he insists she do something to make up for the incident. Another man steps in to interrupt the commotion. He asks who that man thought he was. He states that he should stop because it was very unpleasant. At that moment, the boy receives a slap. The man asks who is to tell him to stop. He says the boy must have watched too many superhero movies to try acting like that. Shortly after, the fat man receives a punch in the stomach and collapses, unconscious. Another young man observes the situation calmly. The fallen man's companions go to help him. They ask if he knew what he had done and what consequences he would face. The sheriff asks if he really needs to know. The henchmen surround the boy while the sheriff's group watches. They ask if he doesn't need any help. The young man asks them to stop, saying it wasn't necessary to go so far because of a child. Then Hyung begins to take off his shirt, declaring that it was going to be an eye for an eye. Asking if the man happened to have any last words, the sheriff replies that he does. At that very moment, he lands a kick on the young man. But shortly after, he is very surprised, because the guy simply dodged his attack. Hyung, in turn, grabs the sheriff by the collar of his shirt, managing to pin the man to the ground. Then he starts preparing a punch. But again, he is surprised, because at that moment, the sheriff tries to punch him. Because of this, the man is alarmed that the guy was able to punch under such conditions. Seeing an opening, the sheriff quickly manages to create some distance. Meanwhile, Hyung starts watching the man with a menacing look. He picks up a bottle from the ground. Meanwhile, the sheriff is thinking about his next move, declaring that he would put an end to it all. Shortly after, Kyung strikes the boy with the bottle, but he manages to block it. As the situation escalates, the police arrive at the scene. One of the henchmen warns the group to avoid trouble, and they start to leave, but not without first threatening the young man. He responds with equal intensity, declaring that he would retaliate if necessary. The scene cuts to a car. One of the men asks if they should investigate the boy, but Hyun decides it's unnecessary. However, he reflects that if it were fate, they would meet again. The scene shifts to a farewell, with the group promising to reunite at the beach in the future. However, they never fulfill the promise. 3 months later, the story moves to a beach, where a suspicious ship is intercepted by a team. The crew is ordered to assemble on the deck while the armed group inspects the ship. Initially, they find the area empty, but upon deeper exploration, they discover something terrifying. One of the researchers finds a hidden passage and upon investigating, encounters a horrifying creature. Alarmed, he alerts the others, but is soon attacked. The team reacts, but the situation spirals out of control when one of the injured soldiers turns into a zombie and attacks his own companions. In the aftermath, only a recording remains showing the battle against the creature. In the video, the group notices that even with only half his body remaining, the zombie continues to move. One of the men questions whether it was truly human. The man replies that it was, as the National Service analyzed the entire body and concluded that the location of the organs and the genetics match human characteristics. Humans typically have hemoglobin levels ranging from 12 to 17, but the presented sample had a result below 3. Another man asks them to stop with the complicated explanations and suggests simplifying everything. The man then explains in simpler terms, stating that the creature didn't breathe oxygen and therefore didn't need lungs or a heart to survive. The other man remarks that with this information, they could make a fortune because if they discover the cause, they could remove lungs and hearts altogether. An older man suggests it would be better to reveal the information little by little to carefully maximize the possibilities. The man comments that they had access to a valuable sample and that the national fortune seemed promising that year. However, he acknowledges that the risks and setbacks were significant, but the researchers were aware of this and questioned whether the project was feasible. The man responds affirmatively, but emphasizes that many things needed to be prepared and studied first, with contagion being one of them. Another man asks if the predicted contact range would be used for this purpose. The man explains that the analysis was still in its preliminary stages, but it was believed that cellular transformation occurred when bacteria from a transmitter's mouth entered another person's bloodstream. He clarifies that contagion only occurred in cases of deep bites, making it less efficient for widespread propagation. The other man questions what might happen if the opposite were true. He asks what would occur if humans bit or consumed those creatures. The man admits that this had not yet been researched. The senior expresses frustration over this gap in the research, stating that even if his subordinates had overlooked it, they should at least have tried to explore that possibility. In the midst of the conversation, another senior asks for calm and inquires whether the samples had already been acquired. He also demands a report on the matter within a week. The man, feeling pressured, thinks he's going to lose his mind but knows he cannot refuse the demand, so he agrees. Immediately after, he asks the others to look at the wall behind them. A hidden area opens, surprising everyone present. When they turn around, they are stunned by what they see. They find multiple samples of zombie creatures that, at that moment, begin advancing toward them. However, the creatures are stopped by a glass barrier. The man explains that it is acrylic glass, which makes it extremely difficult to break. He also mentions that the space contains only half the normal oxygen level, allowing the creatures to move even without depending on it. Additionally, he points out that those creatures don't feel pain at all. Observing the situation, the senior comments that the creatures had all the means to survive, but none to die. However, he notes that their level of intelligence seemed extremely low. He argues that intelligence is the primary requirement for a soldier. He then questions whether those creatures would be unable to use weapons. The other man responds that he thought not, but that didn't mean they were without value. He asks whether military operations simulations had been conducted with those creatures. The man affirms, explaining that they calculated the impact of introducing the creatures into a modern city without any warning. Another man comments that the priority should be containing the spread of this information and asks how the experiment results were in a megacity. The man mentions that the results were extremely significant. He explains that the difference lay in population density, as a small city has a very different dynamic. Additionally, he highlights that the average mobility cycle of people in urban areas was about 20 kilometers per day. The other man then asks the leader what he thought, considering those numbers. He questions whether it would be strategically worth starting with a large city. The man responds that they couldn't focus too much on the starting point because the priority was eliminating the creatures. He suggests that it would be more interesting to use the situation as a war strategy. Additionally, he comments that those creatures could be a strategic weapon as powerful as a nuclear weapon, depending on how they were used. Then he asks what the weaknesses of the creatures are. The other man explains that the creatures did not respond to any stimuli and that wounds or scars didn't affect them at all. However, he clarifies that once their brains were damaged, they would stop moving at all costs. He also mentions that research showed they died when exposed to temperatures below 55 degrees. The other man remarks that this meant they could be controlled. The man agrees but points out that, as shown in the video, there were important issues to consider, such as contagion and other factors. The senior states that they would have 2 years to resolve all of this. He promises to provide all the necessary financial support but demands that within this period, a vaccine capable of preventing mutations be developed. Time passes and the scene cuts to another location. That man appears very worried, questioning whether he had done the right thing. Even so, he tries to convince himself not to stress and that this was the correct way to act. However, something more urgent catches his attention as a kind of barricade appears in the middle of the road. It is already too late as his car is hit by it. As a result, a traffic accident occurs. A group of people seem to be waiting for him. Soon it is revealed that the leader of the group is the same man who had fought with the sheriff earlier. He declares that they will finish this quickly. The scene then cuts to another location, with that boy from before sending a message to his companions asking how they were doing. He mentions that he always thought the 4 of them were together. However, it had been 3 months since they had separated. He asks how they were feeling about the situation. Additionally, he is still curious to know how they are doing. He mentions that he had also been promoted to a special level shooter, and yesterday he hit 20 shots on a target 250 meters away in front of the commander. For that reason, he thinks it would probably be very interesting to them. However, he decides to save the rest of the details for when they meet during the holidays. After writing all these notes, the boy folds the paper. The scene then cuts to those trucks from before. The other man asks what happened, and the guy replies that something was stuck in the tire, so he needed to check it out for a moment. Shortly after, the man begins inspecting the back of the truck. He suspects they are being targeted by someone. As such, he starts passing this information to his other companions. However, it is already too late, as he has already been discovered. At that moment, he collapses to the ground unconscious. Hyun then orders them to pack up those things. Additionally, they are told to organize the rest. Afterward, the henchmen begin advancing on those vehicles. They manage to take them down one by one. The other man, watching everything from inside the car, wonders if those bastards are really gangsters. Amid the situation, another guy starts organizing the entire group, assigning tasks to request support from headquarters to prepare. However, at that very moment, one of his companions is taken down. Then it is revealed that Hyung is behind all of it. Shortly after, he punches the guy. At that moment, the other soldiers begin shooting at Hyung. However, he dodges all the bullets. Soon after, he grabs someone to use as a shield. Watching the situation, the soldiers comment that the guy is insane. In response, Hyung just smiles. The scene cuts to inside a car where a man seems to be analyzing Hyung and saying he is completely crazy. Another man asks how important the matter is for him to get personally involved. The man then asks if he knows the president of the Taein group. He mentions that the president's secretary came yesterday and instructed them to protect the item inside the truck at all costs. The man thinks that the leader of the Taein group is a top-tier figure in South Korea's business world. Additionally, he is the key supporter who transformed the Manbag group into a national organization. Without the substantial support of the Taein group, the Manbag group wouldn't even exist today. For this reason, it's unbelievable that President Hwang is issuing such an order. He wonders what the item could be to justify so much effort. The man responds that it doesn't matter, as they only need to do what they were told and then collect the money. He thinks that the emperor of the business world is commanding the emperor of the night to obtain something. That's why there was something strange about the situation. The scene then cuts to Hyung asking if they had finished organizing everything. He states that he will personally check the item. The group starts inspecting the back of the truck. It's revealed that a password is needed to open the door. One of the men asks if they should transfer the cargo to another truck. Hyung replies that they can't do that because if there's a tracking device, their location would be exposed. Shortly after, another man appears, claiming he found someone hiding in the truck's passenger seat. The man caught tries to defend himself, saying he doesn't know anything and begs for his life. They place the man on the ground and start asking him multiple questions. They examine the man's ID badge as Hyung approaches him. Hyung asks for the password to open the truck. The man replies that he doesn't know, as that information is highly confidential and only known to the agents. At that moment, Hyung strikes the man in the face, tearing part of it. He states that he will ask again. The man, desperate, pleads for his life and begs to be spared. Hyung again asks if he knows the truck's password. The man responds that they shouldn't open that door. Hyung hits the man again, who continues begging not to be killed. Hyung says that instead of worrying about others, he should focus on his own life, as he could die at any moment. He tells the man to reveal the information quickly, as he wouldn't have a peaceful death if he kept hiding it. The man hesitates but eventually reveals the truck's password. Another soldier says they should check if the password is correct. Shortly after, it is revealed that the truck's door has been opened. Then, another man appears, asking why it's taking so long. The soldier gets irritated by the question. However, Hyung stops him from reacting. Soon after, the other man starts approaching the truck. The man thinks that bastard is the number 2. He had heard that this man stayed behind when it was dangerous and only appeared at moments like this. The man then opens the truck door. He begins to wonder what could be inside for even National Intelligence Service agents to be assigned to protect it. He believes that something of interest to President Hyung shouldn't be weak. That's why he wants to find out quickly to avoid regrets. Inside the truck, the man begins to wonder why it's so cold. He supposes that the area might be a freezer. Turning on his flashlight, he starts to inspect the space. At that moment, he is shocked by what he sees. He finds what appears to be a frozen person. He supposes it might be a corpse. Shortly after, he begins inspecting another box. An unknown person seems to be behind him as he investigates. Even so, he remains deep in thought. He wonders why those idiots are transporting corpses. He also questions why President Hyung would be interested in something like this. He starts examining the corpse and assumes it has a human face. However, the corpse has bite marks as if from some animal. Shortly after, the scene cuts to outside the truck. A soldier urges them to hurry up because they need to leave. Another man says they don't know if they're screwed if they take the wrong thing. That's why he asks them to stop rushing him. Shortly after, the man hears a noise. Looking back, he sees a zombie. He's surprised and wonders if that isn't a corpse. The monster starts observing him closely. The man realizes it's definitely not just a corpse. He supposes it might be some kind of advanced cryogenic technology. Shortly after, the creature lunges toward him. The man quickly dodges the attacks. He starts using his phone to defend himself. He delivers a series of attacks on the monster. Shortly after, he falls to the ground. Confident, he declares that he's the number 2 and won't be easily defeated. However, something unexpected happens. Other zombies appear at the scene. The zombies bite the man, who desperately begins to plead for them to get away. However, it's already too late. Shortly after, the scene cuts back to outside the truck. Another man asks Hyung if they should go inside since the other man is taking too long. Hyung tells them to forget it and asks if it's necessary to cause problems for no reason. He orders them to let the man do what he needs to do. At that moment, screams start coming from the truck. Hyung coldly observes the situation. Shortly after, a group of soldiers approaches the truck. They ask what's happening and demand that the door be opened immediately. At that moment, another soldier opens the truck door. When he begins looking inside, he is confronted with a horrifying scene. Quickly, the soldier rushes to help the other man. He starts attacking all the monsters and asks what the rest of the group is doing. He demands that they help as well. At that moment, another zombie appears behind the soldier and bites him. He is struck at a vital point. Shortly after, he begins to change and becomes a zombie too. Everyone starts fleeing from the truck. Hina continues to observe the situation carefully. He wonders what those creatures are and what is happening. If things continue this way, everyone will be killed. Shortly after, a group of soldiers arrives with bats to defend themselves. Hyung orders them to leave the area. He starts attacking the remaining zombies. He comes across a peculiar scene. He notices that one of the zombies is devouring another soldier. Furthermore, he finds this extremely disrespectful. At that moment, Hyung dislocates the monster's head. Another soldier warns Hyung to watch his back. He looks to the side and sees 2 monsters advancing toward him. Barely, Hyung manages to dodge. He thinks that this monster is moving even after being struck multiple times. He wonders what kind of creature it is and whether they will ever stop. Shortly after, he begins delivering a series of attacks on the creatures. He states that this is incredibly annoying. The other zombie rises again. Hyun laughs as he realizes the situation. He declares that these bastards are truly fascinating. However, he still wants to know how these bastards were killed before. He recalls that one of them was finished when its head was dislocated. Therefore, he concludes that this is the only way to defeat them. Shortly after, Hyun advances on another zombie and begins stabbing it as well. For a moment, he has to dodge, thinking that if he had moved the knife even a second later, he would have been killed. At that moment, he kicks the zombie and remarks that it seems like they also have broken bones. He starts defeating them one by one. Time passes and the scene cuts to Hyun lying on the ground. He says that now he knows everything, declaring that to defeat these monsters, one simply needs to dislocate their heads. Hyun approaches a monster and begins retrieving the knife embedded in its chest. In the next moment, the zombie awakens, but Hyun manages to dodge the attack and responds with a kick to the monster's leg. The zombie falls to the ground. To protect himself, Hyun grabs a metal bar and states that these creatures are very real, unlike their appearance. He mentions that his friends were defeated but doesn't seem the least bit scared. He then acknowledges the monster and begins delivering a series of attacks. The monster falls to the ground and Hyun says that it should choose wisely whom to be loyal to. Meanwhile, the monster on the ground still tries to move. Hyun is surprised by this, wondering if the monster doesn't care that its bones are completely broken. About to deliver the final blow, Hyun says it was great to see its incredible will to resist, but all of it is useless. Before landing the final strike, someone asks him to stop. Shortly after, an unknown car appears. The other man remarks that it's good Hyun has so much energy to use, but he should take it easy and not defeat them all at once. He suggests leaving at least one intact to secure the reward. Hyun remains silent, seemingly reconsidering. Surprised, he asks if such a thing really exists, as he thought he had only seen this in horror movies. The man asks if Hyun has been bitten anywhere, but Hyun doesn't seem to want to talk about it. He declares that he should handle this on his own because he will bring his companions. Shortly after, he starts leaving. The man observes that Hyun is difficult but incredibly strong. However, he should put that aside and deal with the matter at hand first. He states that President Hyung must be desperate for this. The scene cuts to the zombie from before, now tied up and placed in a car's cargo area. The other man asks where Director Choi is. Another man says he is still unconscious, possibly due to significant blood loss. The man comments that Choi is fearless and wonders why he opened that thing in the first place. He suggests sending Choi to a hospital. Another man remarks that the items have been loaded inside. In response, the man says he will leave immediately, asking them to be careful and clean up the mess before returning. The car starts to leave. The scene cuts to a man speaking with Hyung, stating that he is disappointed in him. He mentions that his team members died before his eyes, but Hyung only thought about money. Hyung asks him not to take it personally and says they should just clean up the mess. Still frustrated, the man has no choice but to agree. Hyung then says that after cleaning up, they would drink together and pray for their fallen comrades. At that moment, shouting begins. The group is shocked to see one of the undead rising. Hyung observes the situation carefully, wondering why the guy is moving like that. He finds it extremely suspicious. Shortly after, the man starts hugging his friend, saying he thought he was dead. He insists they should take him to the hospital. Hyung notices the situation and tells the man to step away from the zombie. However, it's already too late because the man has been bitten. The other group of soldiers hears the shouting and starts approaching the scene, asking what happened. Hyung tells them to stay back and begins fighting the two zombies. He observes the situation coldly, realizing that those two had turned into the undead. However, he wants to understand why, assuming it must be contagious. Shortly after, another soldier points out that the others were also moving even though they were dead. He questions what those creatures in front of them are. Then, all the monsters start advancing toward the remaining living group. Amidst the chaos, Hyung wonders what he should do. He orders everyone to get into the car, saying they need to leave the area immediately. Soon, the car appears and someone tells Hyung to get in. Quickly, Hyung does so. From the window, he sees one of his soldiers begging for help. However, it's already too late. The soldier is overpowered. Seeing this, Hyung simply ignores it, stating they should just start the car. The entire group begins to drive away. However, something unexpected happens. One of the undead stands in front of them. It quickly starts getting into the vehicle. Desperate, Hyung tells the driver to go faster. But it's too late because the zombie has already grabbed the driver. At that moment, the car crashes into a wall. As a result, the vehicle explodes. Time passes and it appears Hyung is still alive. However, the same cannot be said for the driver. Meanwhile, the fire rages inside the vehicle. Amid the chaos, Hyung realizes his arm is broken. Even so, he manages to get out of the area. Leaving the driver behind, Hyung looks to the side and is shocked. He sees several of those zombies again. Determined, he declares that he must defeat them all. However, he realizes he no longer has his knife. He left it back at the previous location. Because of this, the situation becomes dire, and he knows the night will be very long. The scene then cuts to another location. A siren begins to sound in that area. At that moment, a girl gets up. She wonders what's going on and whether something is wrong. However, if that's the case, there's nothing she can do about it. Shortly after, the girl descends the stairs. She states there was an alarm and immediately comes down, asking what the problem is with the security system. A man responds that there's an issue with the fences. Pointing his finger, he asks if she sees the smoke, saying it looks like someone crashed a car in that direction. Concerned, the girl asks if it was a major accident. She then notices someone trying to get past the fence. Meanwhile, the officers begin to intercept, stating they will report him to the police. Another man says the guy crashed his car, and on top of that, seems to have drunk too much alcohol. As the man starts climbing over a wall, another officer says he cannot enter that place. At that moment, Hyung collapses to the ground, covered in blood. Yin responds that if there's no issue, she will return to her room. However, at that moment, both are shocked by what they see. Despite being severely injured, Hyung manages to overpower the two officers. He then grabs a metal rod. The other man is stunned, wondering if Hyung isn't drunk, and if that's why he's so strong. As a defensive measure, the officer pulls out his gun, stating that if Hyung gets any closer, he will shoot him. However, Hyung still advances toward the officer. He quickly strikes the officer. Meanwhile, Yin watches the situation and surprises Hyung. With a menacing look, stares intently. Desperate, the girl thinks she really needs to escape. She quickly begins to run. Looking to the side, she notices the door. She heads toward it and immediately starts locking it. However, Hyung is still managing to get inside. Amid the situation, he thinks his shoulder feels very weak. If you need anything else, just let me know. The girl then asks if he's even aware of his actions. She says he might regret it later. At that moment, Hyung stops. He says that if they stayed in that place, they would end up being killed. But even so, he adds that it would be a relief, because those monsters, once they arrived there, wouldn't just die. He assures her that he wouldn't hurt her if she opened the door for him. Additionally, he promises to protect her from those monsters. Amid this situation, the girl wonders what this man is talking about. She says she doesn't know what to do, especially since he broke in and beat up 3 policemen. Standing up, Hyung says he doesn't care whether she trusts him or not. However, he says she needs to trust him somehow, because if she doesn't open that door, everyone will die. Shortly after, those zombies appear near the location. Time passes and the scene cuts to the zombies at the door from before. However, it's already locked. Inside, the girl asks what those monsters are. Hyung responds that he's not sure, but he's certain they aren't some surprise gift he brought with him. Irritated, the girl says she doesn't like his humor. Hyung replies that he really doesn't know what those things are. He says he saw them earlier that day. Therefore, she should help him deal with them at that moment so he can recover his arm. Hyung adds that this is all he knows about the monsters. And furthermore, they don't give up in any way. Then Hyung gets up and grabs a knife from the kitchen. The girl watching this situation seems very nervous. Shortly after, she averts her gaze. Hyung notices this. He asks where she's going. The girl replies that she's going to her room because she needs to call the police. She explains that she left her phone there. However, Hyung says he doesn't think that's a good idea. Irritated, she asks why and accuses him of being afraid or feeling guilty. Hyung responds that it's not that. He says that if the monsters bite a human, that human will turn into another monster. Therefore, if she calls the police and they get bitten by the monsters, there will only be more monsters. He asks if she thinks she can handle that. Yin replies that they could explain it to the police first. However, Hyung simply smiles. He says she should tell the police there are undead monsters roaming around. For that reason, no officer would believe her. Frustrated, Yin asks what she should do. She complains that his depressing statements are affecting her. At that moment, a noise begins to echo through the place. Yin assumes they've broken the gate, but Hyung responds no. He explains that a specially strong glass door like that doesn't sound like that when it breaks. For that reason, he says they found another way in. Shortly after, Hyung hands the girl a metal bar. He tells her to hold on to it, as it's good for beginners. But he assures her she shouldn't worry. He won't ask her to fight. It's just a precaution in case something happens. Even so, he tells her to watch him during the fight so she can learn something. He demonstrates a move in the air. He asks if she understands. However, she replies that she can't do it. Even so, Hyun hands her the metal bar, saying it's her responsibility. As he's about to leave, the girl tells him not to go. She says she wants to go with him. Hearing this, Hyun remains silent. He eventually agrees and tells her not to get too close to him. The two then begin walking through the area. Yin seems very nervous. She says this is exhausting. She asks why they aren't using the elevator. Hyun replies that it's too dangerous. Even when the elevator opens, it's extremely dangerous. At that moment, they both hear a sound. Hyung says it's about to begin and tells the girl not to make a sound unless absolutely necessary. Hearing this, Yin prepares herself for anything. As they climb the stairs, they think the place is eerily quiet. The closer they got to the next floor, Hyung noticed something above. At that moment, they heard another sound. A zombie suddenly appeared. However, Hyung narrowly dodged the attack. He began striking the monster with a flurry of blows. Meanwhile, Yin watched the scene in complete shock. She wondered if the monster was already dead, but Hyun told her to go back to the kitchen immediately. He explained that it would be harder to fight if she stayed there. Shortly after, more zombie sounds echoed. More monsters started descending the stairs. Meanwhile, Hyung smiled maniacally. He thought his current condition made fighting on the stairs difficult, so he decided to lure the monsters into a wider area. Soon after, another zombie charged at him. Hyung dodged and countered with a strike. However, the attack had no effect. More zombies began advancing. With a menacing look, Hyung observed them. He started attacking the monster's lower limbs. Soon after, he grabbed one by the collar. It seemed he managed to immobilize it. However, another zombie appeared. Hyun countered with a kick. The zombie flailed in all directions. Hyun began punching it repeatedly. Then he grabbed his knife and dislodged the monster's head. But as he looked back, he heard a scream. It was revealed that a zombie was advancing toward Yin. Hyun instructed the girl to strike the zombie's leg. Yin remembered Hyun's earlier instructions. She immediately followed his guidance and managed to land a blow on the monster. The attack seemed to have some effect. The monster fell on top of Yin. It was about to bite her, but at that moment, Hyun appeared and saved her. He said he kept his promise to protect her. But even so, it wasn't over yet. Time passed and the scene cut to Hyun taking Yin to the earlier location. The two began to rest, recalling everything that had happened. But they didn't have time to relax as the monsters were already at the door again. Hyun, surprised, remarked that the monsters didn't even give them a moment to rest. He said they were too excited and that he should play with them. Since they were in the refrigerator area, the monsters would be very confused. Then Hyun turned on some sort of refrigeration system. Below it, a wire appeared torn. Hyun said the monsters couldn't hear, but he wanted to let them know it would get colder. He explained that this was the best he could do. They would have to wait until morning to leave that place. Time passed and the scene cut to the zombies breaking through the area. However, Hyun seemed prepared for it all. He began observing all the zombies. In response, he grabbed his knife and said he would play with them. Then he grabbed some sort of cart. He charged at the monsters with it. However, one of the zombies was still beside him. Hyun easily defeated it. The zombie fell unconscious to the ground, but more monsters were still in front of him. Hyun observed them with a cold stare. He dislodged the hand of one monster, but it remained standing. Hyun said that was enough. He admitted he tried his best and now might lose. But at that moment, another monster appeared behind him. Hyun managed to avoid and attack it. As a result, all the monsters were defeated. With an incredible pose, Hyun lit a cigarette, but he remained deep in thought about everything. He asked his companions to rest now. Shortly after, Hyun began walking around the area. He thought the situation was extremely dangerous and beyond his control. Moreover, he never imagined monsters like these could exist. By now, one of his companions had probably become one of them. He didn't know what was happening and it frustrated him. Then, Hyung looked to the side and saw other people. Noticing their uniforms, he assumed they were police officers. He thought there was much to explain and should ask what was really going on. Shortly after, Hyung waved to the officers, but at that moment he noticed something strange. Those officers were monsters. They quickly began advancing on him. Hyung felt extremely disappointed. He wondered how many people had turned into monsters. Time passed and the scene cut to another location. A boy commented that he was very bored with his job. Shortly after, another boy called the two over. He said Jinwoo had sent a letter. The two were very surprised by what they heard. Desperately, they ran to read the letter. The sheriff reading the letter was shocked, saying he always knew Jinwoo would turn out this way. The other boy then remarked that if Jinwoo was in the military, it meant he was probably good with firearms. And the other boy responds that Jinwoo had always been good at games and shooting. Shortly after, the sheriff glances to the side. He notices that the other boy is on his phone again. He approaches him and asks what he's watching. Then he grabs his phone, questioning why he looks so surprised. He assumes the boy is probably watching something inappropriate. However, the boy responds that it's not that. He explains that he's watching another piece of news. Shortly after, the other two move closer to see what's on his phone. They press play on the video. They're met with footage of several monsters and what looks like a news report or recording. Surprised, they wonder what they're seeing. The footage shows many desperate people being chased by monsters. The group watches in shock. One of them wonders if the monsters are biting the other people. The sheriff, surprised, asks if this is a trailer for a movie. The other boy says it's real footage from the station near their town. He asks if they haven't seen it before. However, the group responds that they haven't seen anything like it. Hearing this, the boy is disappointed and calls them idiots. He begins walking away. Looking at his phone, he notices that the content is no longer available in his country. Meanwhile, the sheriff is irritated with the boy. Another boy tells him to let it go because they have work to do. Then, another guy wonders why Mr. Huang hasn't arrived yet. He says it's taking too long. The sheriff mentions that Huang is probably somewhere drinking again, and the other boy says he'll try calling him. However, he realizes something. He wonders where his phone is. The sheriff tries to grab his own phone to check, but he realizes his phone isn't there either. He states that they had placed all their phones in Mr. Huang's truck earlier, and now they'll have to manage without them and work hard so they can have their club party the next day. Amid this, another boy urges everyone to stay focused, saying he's wondering where Mr. Huang might be right now. At that moment, something unexpected happens. Several helicopters appear above the three of them. They wonder what's going on. Additionally, one of them assumes that Mr. Huang might be buying food for them at that moment. Meanwhile, the delay continues. Shortly after, the scene cuts to another location where several monsters seem to have taken over the city. Time passes again, and the scene shifts to another place. Meanwhile, the group from earlier is on top of a building. One of them mentions he's very hungry. While speaking, he begins scanning the surroundings with binoculars. The sheriff asks where he got them. The boy replies that he won them from a claw machine. The sheriff, surprised, asks if he's good at it, saying that's unexpected. But the boy says it's not true because he spent $10,000 to get just that. The sheriff, surprised, mentions that he could have bought it for $3,000 at his stationery store. For that reason, he wasted a lot of money. Using the binoculars, the boy says he can't see much. He can only observe what's directly in front of him. The sheriff responds that of course, he can't see much because it's a night vision device. Despite that, the boy is excited, claiming it's extremely useful. However, the other two disagree, saying you should just throw it away. Then the scene cuts to the other boy from before, the one with the phone. He says it's extremely hot there. The sheriff asks if the rookie still hasn't been able to access his phone, and the boy responds no. He also admits he doesn't understand why they decided to build a senior center in such a remote location. Another boy responds that it's because the planned new city was canceled. Standing up, the sheriff tells them to stop talking nonsense and says they should eat soon or they'll starve while waiting for Mr. Huang. Another boy then points out that they don't have a car, wondering how they'll get to a place to eat. But another responds that they should just walk there. The rookie replies that walking will take them a total of 50 minutes. The other boy says it takes that long if they follow the main road. And so if they pass through the fence, it would only take them 10 minutes. However, even then, the rookie didn't like the idea. He said he would stay there and ask them to just bring something back for him when they returned. At that moment, the sheriff apparently noticed something. He asked why the other guy had brought his gloves. He questioned if he really needed to show off that he was a hard worker. The guy responded that it was just more convenient and that wearing them while climbing looked cooler to him. The other guy told him to stop chatting and said they should leave quickly. Shortly after, the scene cut to the group outside their workplace. It seemed they had already jumped over the fence. However, one of the boys asked for help because he was still struggling. Then more helicopters appeared above the area. The other guy commented that it must be nice to have one of those since they could bring one back after serving in the military. But the sheriff replied that owning a used car was more than enough. Then the group began to hear someone singing. The sheriff explained that there was always a radio at that place and someone would sing from morning to night. He added that it was very annoying. Looking down, they saw the person who had been singing earlier. The sheriff said that guy irritated him a lot and suggested they leave quickly. Shortly after, another guy noticed something. It was revealed that there was a monster in front of them. The group, unsure of what it was, commented that the neighborhood was really strange. One of the boys, analyzing the monster, said that person looked very different. He wondered why an office worker was in that place. Looking at the wounds, he noticed the person was covered in what looked like ketchup. Then he approached the person, asking if he was okay and if he was injured anywhere. Shortly after, the monster lunged at him. It was about to bite his finger. Meanwhile, the boy struggled to push the creature away. He asked what it was doing and why it wanted to bite other people's fingers. Another boy, observing the situation, noticed the person's eyes looked very strange. The sheriff quickly moved toward the monster, saying that man had started this, and for that reason, he was going to beat him up. Shortly after, he charged at the monster. He kicked it, sending it flying. The sheriff then asked if the boy was okay, and the other boy said he should check where he had been bitten. In response, the boy just smiled. He said he didn't feel anything and it tricked them both. He mentioned that the gloves were really incredible. At that moment, the three of them looked to the side. The sheriff was very surprised and asked if that creature had already regained consciousness. He told the other guy to hand over his gloves. Then he grabbed them, saying he was going to talk to that person. Meanwhile, a zombie was observing the group. Then it began charging at them. The sheriff observed the situation. He quickly charged at the monster and delivered a kick. He even managed to break part of its body. However, the sheriff grew concerned, realizing he had kicked a very strong monster. He cautiously approached the creature, still unaware it was not human. Then the zombie charged at him again. The sheriff looked very surprised, wondering what was happening. He thought he had broken one of its bones, and it was still moving. Backing away, the sheriff bumped into a wall. Behind him was a pool. At that moment, an idea came to him. As the monster attacked, the sheriff managed to dodge. However, the monster broke through the wall and fell into the pool. Another guy tried to help the monster stop it from falling into the water, but it was already too late. It had happened. Sansai said the sheriff had just killed a man. The sheriff grew very worried, insisting that the man had run toward the pool on his own. However, another boy told him not to worry because the man would be fine. Still, they should go down to check on him. Even if he was dead, they couldn't leave him alone. At that moment, Sansai looked ahead, seemingly very surprised, realizing the man was still moving. Additionally, he wanted to know what exactly that man was trying to do. Shortly after, the zombies started running a certain direction, and Sansai, still unaware that it was a monster, asked what that man was doing. The sheriff, changing the subject, said they didn't need to know. For that reason, they should just go eat quickly. Meanwhile, the other boy was still deep in thought. He couldn't understand why, even after being kicked by the sheriff, that man remained standing. Moreover, the man had bitten Sansai earlier, making the whole situation seem very strange, especially the railing from before. It had been destroyed completely, even though he had only hit it accidentally. Shortly after, his group called him again. They asked if he was going to eat, and if not, they would leave him behind. The scene then cut to another location, where the group seemed to be descending a flight of stairs. The scene then shifted again, showing several helicopters flying over the city. Below, many zombies like the ones from before were roaming the area, seemingly having taken over the entire city. The scene then cut back to the earlier group, who appeared very excited about getting lunch. The sheriff then said they had arrived at the place, but at that moment, they heard a strange noise. Sansai, climbing the stairs, guessed it might be some kind of festival. The other guy suggested they should go check it out first. Shortly after, Sansai climbed the stairs to investigate what was happening. The other boy, along with the sheriff, followed and was shocked by what they saw. In front of them, massive chaos was unfolding in the city. Everywhere they looked, there was only destruction. The group observed the scene in utter surprise. Sansai remarked that it looked like a scene from the movie they had watched earlier. Shortly after, the other boy covered Sansai's mouth, saying they should leave quietly. He said they needed to leave the area immediately. Meanwhile, the sheriff was carefully observing the situation. At that moment, an unknown person approached them. It was revealed that one of the monsters had noticed the three of them. Immediately, it began charging toward the group. As a defensive measure, the group started descending the stairs again. However, the zombies continued chasing them. Shortly after, the other boy said those were zombies and that this was definitely not a movie. Looking back, the group saw that the monsters were getting closer. Soon after, the three managed to escape the area, but the zombies continued pursuing them. The group headed toward another location. However, Sansai turned in a different direction. He started climbing a type of fence. He asked the group to grab his hand. Then he began climbing the fence. However, a zombie noticed them. The sheriff told him to hold on tightly. At that moment, the sheriff threw the boy over to the other side of the fence. In seconds, the sheriff also jumped over. This left all the zombies on the other side of the area. The two were amazed by what had happened. They remarked that the man was definitely not human. The sheriff said there was no need to say that about him. Even so, amid the situation, there was no time to talk. There were still many zombies surrounding them. It seemed they were about to break through the fence. The sheriff guessed that those monsters couldn't climb the fence. He said they were zombies and therefore couldn't do things like that. Observing the monsters, Samsic remarked that they really seemed like zombies. Even so, it was good they no longer needed to run. For that reason, they should rest. However, you said they shouldn't relax too much. You warned that the zombies might still manage to get over the fence. The sheriff asked if that was even possible. Samzik then asked if they thought Mr. Huang had also been attacked by those monsters. You replied that it was highly likely. The sheriff said they should return to the construction site. They could think about that later. But even so, the entire situation was utterly absurd. Time passed and the scene cut to another location. The sheriff noticed there were even more zombies in that area. Samzik asked what they should do since they were surrounded on all sides. The sheriff said the situation was extremely urgent and dangerous, so they should enter the nearest building immediately. You responds that since this was an abandoned station, the possibility of it being unlocked was very small. At worst, the door could even be completely blocked. This would leave them without a place to hide. And even if the door wasn't blocked, there was no way the three of them could lock all the doors in such a massive building. Samzik, on the other hand, asks if the sheriff couldn't just beat those monsters. The sheriff responds that he couldn't do that. Looking at the monsters, it was clear that their bodies were on the outside, meaning hitting them would make a difference. Amid this discussion, Yu suggests that they should kill the monsters. When the sheriff asks if he's serious about killing real people, Yu responds that it wouldn't be murder. He asks them to look at those creatures and states that none of them were human. Shortly after, a stone is thrown at one of the monsters. It's revealed that Samzik was the one doing it. The monster begins staring at the group and the sheriff silently observes the situation. Then the sheriff comments that Yu had questioned whether they could kill the monsters or not. He says he could do it, but would need a weapon. After all, he couldn't kill them with bare hands. He adds that, as they could see, those were just monsters. Yu responds that it would be difficult. He asks if the sheriff really thought a place like this might have weapons. The sheriff replies that if they couldn't find weapons, they could just throw stones instead. Meanwhile, Samzik reflects on the conversation, thinking he might have seen something useful earlier. At that moment, he seemingly has an idea and asks the group to follow him. The scene then cuts to another location where Samzik appears to have found a tool. Handing it to the sheriff, he asks if it's enough. The sheriff replies that it is and asks how he found it. Samzik explains that he saw it through his telescope. There was a wrench lying nearby. He proudly declares that his toy had been very useful. Observing the situation, both of them are surprised that the tool turned out to be genuinely helpful. Changing the subject, the sheriff says that now they had a weapon. All that was left was to face the monsters. He adds that they should find an open area first and lure the monsters there. However, he admits they couldn't do that at the moment since the monsters were watching their every move. Looking at the fence, the group notices it seems about to collapse. The sheriff considers that there might not be another option. Even so, it could be dangerous. Despite that, he resolves to face the monsters. Shortly after, Samzik raises his hand and says he has an idea. He volunteers to be bait. He declares that being a natural runner, he will cross the fence and make the zombies chase him. The sheriff calls him crazy for constantly risking his life. But Samzik responds that it's the best idea they had so far. He states that he's the fastest among the three of them. Shortly after, the sheriff grabs Samzik by the collar and tells him to stop talking nonsense. He asks who cares if he's fast. He adds that Samzik doesn't need to sacrifice himself and leave others to deal with his death. However, Samzik tells him to calm down and assures him that he never intended to die. Shortly after, the sheriff tells him to listen carefully. He says Samzik should stop volunteering to sacrifice himself for others and prioritize his own life first. For that reason, it would get out of this situation together. Hearing this, Samzik is surprised and smiles, accepting what the sheriff said. He remarks that he's touched the sheriff cares so much about him. Meanwhile, Yu examines the fence, stating it would be dangerous to climb it without a plan. He wonders if there's another way to deal with the zombies without crossing the fence. Shortly after, he seems to have an idea. He suggests loosening half of the screws. Time passes and the scene cuts to another location. Yu says that if they loosen half the screws, the zombies will only be able to push their heads through. Amid this situation, Samzik urges him to hurry, saying he feels the fence could collapse at any moment. Shortly after, the sheriff manages to execute the plan. Yu appears, telling them to speed up. He says he'll remove the fence entirely and that they should handle the zombies as they come through. Thus, the three of them appeared to be well prepared for the situation. Shortly after, Yu jumped and grabbed onto a part of the fence. At that moment, the fence began to collapse. One of the zombies seemed about to enter the area. Amid the situation, the sheriff thought that this was definitely not a human. He then attacked the monster with his weapon. The monster immediately fell to the ground. The sheriff, however, remained in shock. He realized that the creature was still alive while holding off the other monsters. Yu questioned what the sheriff was doing and said he should finish off the monster quickly. With a determined look, the sheriff repeatedly attacked the monster. Within seconds, the creature appeared to be defeated. Samzik, watching the situation, was very surprised. He commented that it took too long to kill the creature. The sheriff moved toward Yu, stating that he should let him handle it. Shortly after, the sheriff delivered another blow to the next zombie. The other monster, noticing this, roared. But none of it was enough because the sheriff had already defeated it too. One by one, the monsters fell before him. Meanwhile, the sheriff observed all the fallen creatures. Shortly after, he began delivering repeated strikes to their bodies. Seeing this, the others stopped the sheriff, saying it was enough and everything was over. The scene then shifted to another area. it was revealed that one of the fences had fallen. A group of zombies was released. Quickly, Yu opened another passage and told the group they needed to escape immediately. The group began to run. However, the sheriff noticed something was wrong. He was stuck on the fence. In this situation, he thought he needed to stay calm. But looking back, he saw several monsters approaching. His composure broke, and in desperation, he used brute force to free himself from the fence. Successfully freeing himself, he felt relieved to be alive. But the relief was short-lived as a zombie grabbed his leg, ready to devour him. Samzik and Yu watched attentively. The sheriff desperately tried to free his leg, delivering a series of blows to the zombie's head. Finally, the zombie let go. However, the sheriff tripped and began falling, landing in a refrigeration unit below. Samzik asked if he was okay, and the sheriff replied that his head hurt. But there was no time to think. They had to keep moving. The group started running again, crossing the bridge they had used earlier. Looking down, they saw the old man from before being attacked by monsters. He begged for help, but the group had no choice but to flee. It was too late to save him. Quickly, they left the area. Yu looked down and was shocked. His city was in complete chaos, and the old man had already been killed. Time passed, and the scene shifted to another location. The man from earlier woke up from sleep and saw the group in front of him. Groggily, he asked why they were yelling so much. The next moment, he was surprised to see the sheriff holding a tool, sealing something shut. The sheriff successfully secured the area. Yu remarked that it was finally protected and that breaking the metal bar would be very difficult. The sheriff asked if they should look for another place, but Yu said no, explaining that it was too dangerous. Since they had some time, they should discuss their next steps. The other man, observing the situation, asked what on earth they were doing. Samzik, seemingly fixing something with the tool, said they could now use the metal bar. The sheriff, grabbing the tool again, began sealing all the gaps in the area. Amid this, the man grew desperate, asking why they were destroying the stairs. The sheriff told him to shut up. Yu told the sheriff to let the man catch his breath, promising to explain everything. Samzik, meanwhile, said that if the man listened, he would thank them for saving his life. Still confused, the man asked what was going on and mentioned that he had fixed the stairs earlier. The next moment, he noticed his clothes were covered in blood and was shocked. He speculated that was why the stairs were broken and guessed the police were probably chasing them. Yu asked him to calm down, promising to explain everything. The sheriff, on the other hand, reflected on everything he had done, admitting that he had killed people. Time passed, and the group recounted everything that had happened to the man. He, horrified, asks if the group expects him to believe that. But they insist they're not lying. Even so, the man still finds it all unbelievable. Looking down, he is horrified to see several monsters surrounding the area. Shortly after, the scene cuts to a news report stating that it's 6 o'clock and the world has become a complete battlefield. Violence and murder are occurring in Seoul and across the nation. To overcome these chaotic times, the South Korean government will deploy all available military and police forces to help. At that moment, the other guy's phone battery dies. Because of that, the news report is cut short. The sheriff asks if the guy has a charger. The man responds that he does. However, it's downstairs in the area filled with zombies. The man then asks if they really need the charger since they had just seen the news. He suggests staying inside until the police and military resolve everything. He even proposes having a drink while they wait. At that moment, Yu says they shouldn't do that. He explains that the police definitely won't help. He mentions that the news about the zombies first appeared at 1:30 a.m. Additionally, 5 hours have passed since then, and yet there are still zombies in the area. The sheriff replies that this means the military and police weren't able to handle it. Samzik says the video they watched earlier this morning was even more sensationalized than the news. Taking that into account, it's already been over 10 hours. The other man still doesn't believe it. He asks if they think he's in some kind of movie. Shortly after, the man grabs his phone again. He says he'll call emergency services. However, he grows frustrated, wondering why it isn't working. The sheriff, visibly irritated, asks if he can knock the man out. Yu tells him not to do that. He says there's something more important. Yu asks how the sheriff's ankle is as he was attacked by a zombie while escaping the fence. The sheriff admits it hurts a little but says it's fine. Yu responds that's good but suggests disinfecting it just in case. He asks the man to hand over his sake. The man seems reluctant to do so. Shortly after, he looks down and sees all the zombies from before. At that moment, he begins screaming. The group wonders why he's doing that. The man asks if the sheriff was bitten by a zombie. The sheriff replies that he wasn't. The man seems very relieved. He thinks the situation would be dire if that had happened. He then says the sheriff was only scratched by the zombie's nails. The sheriff responds that it's basically the same thing. Irritated, the sheriff says he already told them he wasn't bitten, so he's not turning into a zombie. He demands they stop talking nonsense. The man asks if the sheriff has never seen movies, because being bitten isn't the problem. The problem is the infection. Therefore, they should throw the sheriff into the sea to get rid of him before he turns into a zombie. Confused, the sheriff asks what the man is talking about. Quickly, the man charges at the sheriff. He says the sheriff will understand soon enough. If he cares about his friends, he'll accept it. Amid the situation, the sheriff says the man is driving him crazy. At that moment, Yu intervenes. He tells the man to calm down. He insists the sheriff hasn't turned into a zombie. He also asks who the man thinks he is to decide who should live or die. Desperate, the man asks whose side Yu is on. If he's the sheriff's friend, he should let him turn into a zombie, because then they'll all be devoured. Yu grabs the man by the collar and begins insulting him with various names. Amid the chaos, the sheriff tries to break up the fight. He even asks Samzik for help. Samzik responds that they're acting like children. In the midst of the situation, Samzik hears a noise. He wonders why he's hearing music. Shortly after, Samzik says he thinks the sheriff will be fine. He claims he'd never lied to them and insists they should follow him and listen to the sound. The group then approaches the stairs to another floor. They ask what kind of sound it is. It's revealed to be the old man from earlier. Apparently, he's already turned into a monster. Samzik remarks that the old man was bitten earlier. Shortly after, he transformed into a zombie. However, that didn't happen with the sheriff, so he was probably fine. Yu, for his part, says he's right. He mentions that the sheriff was bitten first. So, if he were to turn into a zombie, it would have happened before the old man. The group feels relieved as all their worries seem to dissipate. However, the other man from earlier insists they're all being stupid. He says the virus isn't that simple. While the sheriff might be fine now, there's no telling what might happen later. Shortly after, the sheriff grabs the man from behind. He declares that he'll turn him into a zombie first and then kill him. At that moment, Yu notices something and asks where Samzik is going. Samzik responds that he's apparently looking for something. Soon after, the boy begins climbing the stairs. He says it must be somewhere nearby. At that moment, he finds what he's looking for and comes across some bags. The man shows up asking if those aren't Mr. Wang's work bags. He says they shouldn't touch the belongings of the dead. But Samzik responds that they can't be sure the owners are actually dead. Shortly after, the sheriff arrives and says that whatever Samzik is doing is likely more useful than someone who only knows how to talk. Time passes and Samzik has already opened the bag, finding various tools. He also finds something he had been hoping for and feels delighted. He says he knew it would be there. Looking to the side, Samzik asks what Yu is doing. Yu responds that he's searching for something. The sheriff then asks what it is. Yu says it's a drill and asks what Samzik plans to do with it. Samzik replies that he's going to make a weapon, leaving the two very confused by what they heard. However, the boy seems very confident he can pull it off. The scene then cuts to another moment. The other man asks if this is really their plan. He says it's insane and that watching them makes him horrified by their plan. The sheriff responds that his part is done. Samzik comments that the height looks perfect. Shortly after, the man asks if they're sure it will work. He says that if something goes wrong, it could make things much worse. Yu, however, responds that he understands why the man is anxious, but this is all they can do for now. Yu then puts on glasses and with a determined look begins testing the plan. He thinks he should test it to see if it works. At that moment, he throws the structure down at the zombies. Afterward, Yu notes that the height is too short. For that reason, they'll need to retrieve it. He tries again, throwing the object down. This time, he manages to hit a zombie. Yu feels thrilled, thinking the plan is starting to work. He orders the others to pull the tool back up. As they retrieve it, a monster begins emerging. The group quickly urges the man to approach the monster and finish it off. It's necessary to do so before the monster falls back down. However, the man is still too scared and says he can't do it. The sheriff, frustrated, tells him to switch places so he can do it himself. But the boy responds that it's fine as he's already done it before the previous night. For that reason, he'll handle it himself. Shortly after, Yu gets ready. He strikes the zombie's face. Within seconds, the zombie appears to be defeated. The sheriff quickly approaches Yu, asking if he's okay. The boy assures him he's fine. He says he'll prepare for another attack. Thinking about the situation, he estimates there are 26 zombies on the floor below. But now there are only 22 left. Time passes. The group continues repeating this cycle multiple times. The boy finally announces that there are only 3 zombies left. Additionally, he feels pleased they're almost done. He notes that they're hitting the targets correctly. However, despite their progress, his friends seem to be tiring quickly. He wonders if there's a way to finish this more efficiently. Shortly after, the boy suggests they wrap this up. For that reason, they decide to take a break. Amid the situation, the boy comments that the method is too complicated for them at the moment. There are fewer zombies now. For that reason, they're losing many more targets when throwing objects. Moreover, it was becoming much harder to lure them with sounds as well. Shortly after, the sheriff suggests they should use that guy as bait, since he hadn't done anything so far. Amid the situation, Samzik thinks they really need to find a better way to handle this. At that moment, Yu says they should handle it on their own. The other guy responds that Yu is crazy. However, if he wants to do it, he should go alone. Shortly after, the sheriff calls him an idiot. He adds that he shouldn't worry because no one expects anything from him anyway. Yu replies that he knows it's dangerous. However, it's something they need to do. The group quickly agrees, saying there's a chance it might work. The sheriff mentions that he was getting bored anyway. For that reason, trying this would be more fun. Samzik, for his part, agrees, saying the sheriff is right, especially now that they know the zombie's weakness. Shortly after, Yu says everything is set. He mentions that everyone should put on gloves and gear up to head downstairs. Then the boy asks if the man will join them. The other guy responds that he'll leave it to them. Yu replies that he knew that would happen. However, he asks if the man can at least help pull them back up when they're done. Amid the situation, the man reluctantly agrees to help with that much. Time passes. The the scene shifts to nighttime. The group is finally fully prepared for battle. Shortly after, the three of them descend to a lower floor. The man above calls out to them. He says that if they get bitten, he won't lower the rope for them. The sheriff, observing the situation, asks if they can really trust him. However, Yu tells him not to worry. He says the man knows he'd be in danger without them around. Then Samzik looks ahead. He mentions that he can see some zombies. There are 2 of them nearby. However, one is still missing from sight. The sheriff warns that if they take care of the 2 visible ones, the last one will probably show up. Yu, however, asks them to wait and suggests forming a plan first. The sheriff doesn't seem to care. He quickly approaches the zombies. He declares that they should come at him so they can finish this quickly. At that moment, the zombies charge at him. With a threatening look, the sheriff observes them. He swiftly strikes one zombie on the head. It appears that he has defeated it. The sheriff feels pleased with his success. However, there's no time to celebrate as another zombie is already advancing toward him. Once again, the sheriff delivers an attack. Shortly after, he climbs onto the zombie's stomach, landing another blow. Then he falls back to the ground and asks if they found the last zombie. Yu responds that they haven't. Samzik says he doesn't think it's in the building. The sheriff agrees and says they should stay close together. The last zombie could be hiding and might jump out at any moment. At that moment, the 3 of them hear a noise. Yu mentions that it came from outside the building. He assumes it might be another zombie. Something seems to have hit the fence on the other side. Amid the situation, the sheriff says he'll check it out first. He asks the others to stay back a bit since they're less prepared. The sheriff opens the door but finds nothing unusual. However, he looks to the side and sees a zombie stuck on a fence. Time passes and the 3 regroup. Yu comments that the zombie might have gotten stuck while running, but he wonders why it isn't making any noise. Samzik tells him to look closely. It seems a wire is cutting into its throat, preventing it from making sounds. The sheriff says the zombie can't move anymore and feels a bit guilty about it. Yu responds that if the sheriff wants, he can take care of it. But the sheriff says it's unnecessary. He observes the monster again and swiftly finishes it off. Yu asks if the sheriff is okay. The sheriff responds that he'll think of it as taking out the trash. Samzik comments that Jinwoo would probably think the same way. The sheriff gets very irritated and asks why Samzik brought up Jinwoo's name suddenly. He says Jinwoo is in the military right now and is probably killing more zombies than they are. The scene cuts to another location where a group of soldiers is quickly moving toward a destination. They are instructed to gather at the training field. The soldiers appear to be heading somewhere, and the scene cuts to a visibly frustrated soldier. He remarks that the situation only makes him feel like they're doomed. The scene shifts to another location where a man is urging the soldiers to move quickly. He looks ahead and notices Jinwoo slowing down. The soldier calls out to Jinwoo and introduces him to their captain. The captain orders Jinwoo to stop wasting time and move faster, stating he doesn't have time to wait. The soldier obeys his superior's orders. Jinwoo, picking up a magazine, wonders what it is, suspecting they might be real bullets. The scene cuts to the group of soldiers inside a truck, seemingly heading to a specific location. Meanwhile, Jinwoo sits in one of the trucks, thinking that everyone should be excited at the idea of seeing real action. But it seems most are nervous, except for the squad leader, who is visibly displeased with the situation. A soldier beside Jinwoo greets him. He comments that the atmosphere is crazy today, as if everyone had eaten something strange. He mentions that some soldiers were killed in the area and that their spirits will haunt the place, turning them into legends. He jokes that every time a soldier dies, they come back to kill others. The leader appears and tells the soldier to stop spouting nonsense. The soldier replies that he was just trying to provoke the youngest member of the squad, who seemed very scared. The soldier then turns to Jinwoo, suggesting that if he's a good marksman, he should be able to shoot ghosts too. He says he trusts Jinwoo. The general, observing in silence, seems relieved as the tension in the group eases. At that moment, the group hears a noise. Another soldier asks if that was the sound of a gunshot. Meanwhile, Jinwoo observes the situation closely. He feels desperate, wondering if there's really a war happening at that moment. Shortly after, he looks to the side again. It's revealed that they've arrived at their destination. Then, another soldier instructs everyone to disembark. The group follows the leader's orders. The leader states that it's now 6:45 p.m. and that they'll proceed with strict orders from this point forward. One of the soldiers raises his hand, saying he has a question. He mentions that he hasn't heard anything about the current situation and asks if they could explain what's going on. The man hesitates before answering. He explains that the city of Sanshuk is currently infested with zombies. Hearing this, the entire group is shocked. They ask him to repeat what he just said. Meanwhile, Jinwoo listens to the conversation intently. The soldiers, hearing this, are skeptical, dismissing it as nonsense. However, Jinwoo doesn't think the same. He states that the atmosphere is far too serious to be part of military training. At that moment, the group hears more gunfire. Another soldier questions if this isn't too real to be an army drill. At that moment, another man gathers the soldiers' attention. He states that this is not training in any way. For that reason, they are in a real war. He admits that it's hard to believe, even he struggles to believe it. However, it's a fact that a virus is spreading not only in the city but throughout the entire country as they speak. Another soldier asks if their orders are to kill the monsters. The soldier confirms this and says that if there are survivors, they are to help them escape. Meanwhile, Jinwoo observes a fellow soldier. He asks if the soldier is okay. However, the soldier quickly starts running in a panic. Shortly after, he begins vomiting on the side. The soldier tells everyone to focus as they don't have much time. Taking out a map, he explains that they are currently researching the city and its surroundings. For that reason, they've marked the city as the center and are exploring nearby regions for survivors. He marks a location for Squad 2 to investigate. Another soldier asks about the layout of the apartment. He mentions that if it's too large, it will be difficult for their group to search it entirely. Observing the situation, Jinwoo notes that their group has fewer members than the others. Additionally, they haven't received much training. The soldier replies that the apartment is 10 stories high. He mentions that he has been assigned to remain in the meeting area to see if any additional squads arrive. For this reason, the young man begins issuing more specific orders. Additionally, a squad leader isn't named without reason. He must protect his comrades at all costs. Having no other choice, the man accepts the responsibility. He says he will do his best. Hearing this, the leader is very pleased. He says he knew the man would be capable of handling everything. Shortly after, the soldier turns to his group. He states that they've all heard what was said. The group becomes very anxious, asking what they should do. They mention that they'll have to enter the apartment. At that moment, the man tells them to shut up. He says he knows they've never faced a situation like this before. He acknowledges that it's scary for everyone. And to be honest, he's scared too. For this reason, they need to understand. However, he asks them to consider the possibility that their families might be in that building. He questions if they would still refuse to enter and just stand by doing nothing. At that moment, Jinwoo appears. He says he will submit a report stating he entered the building. For that reason, he promises that no matter what happens, he will always help them. Shortly after, the soldier places a hand on Jinwoo's shoulder. He tells him to stop trying to act so cool. Amid the situation, the group seemingly gathers their courage. They state that they can't let Jinwoo go in alone. For this reason, they decide to enter as well. The group quickly seems to have made their decision. Meanwhile, the soldier from before appears to be deeply conflicted about it. Reluctantly, he says he will join them too. Hearing the group's determination, the squad leader seems very pleased. For this reason, they decide to move quickly toward the designated location. Shortly after, the scene shifts to another area after some time. A barricade seems to be set up in a specific part of the city. The protagonist group appears to be heading toward it. However, the nervous soldier still seems uneasy about everything. He says that no matter how much he thinks about it, it feels overwhelming. Another soldier replies that there's nothing they can do about it, so they should proceed without questioning. At that moment, a noise echoes through the area. Another soldier asks the leader what they should do. The leader responds that they will scout the apartment and the nearby area before entering. The place they need to access is a white apartment building at the end of the street. It only has 10 floors, but it could still take some time to search entirely. For this reason, they'll assess the situation and then decide whether to proceed together. After this explanation, the group begins moving. The general looks to the side and notices Jengyu. He instructs Jengyu to stay close and be ready to pull the trigger when he gives the order. The protagonist, hearing this, seems prepared. The scene cuts to another location. One soldier up front is visibly nervous. He wonders if something might suddenly rise up. Meanwhile, another soldier reflects that he never imagined seeing a dead person in real life. At that moment, a noise echoes through the area. The soldier comments that he thinks something fell from the apartment because of the zombies. Or perhaps it was someone who chose to end it all to avoid becoming a monster. Meanwhile, the group observes the situation. They wonder if they should investigate. Ahead, several dead bodies lie on the ground. Another soldier approaches them. He asks if anyone can hear him. Meanwhile, someone moans in pain due to a leg injury. A soldier notices someone with a bite on their leg. At that moment, the monster rises. It lunges at the soldier. Quickly, the monster manages to bite him. The other soldiers watch in shock. They try to contain the monster, but it's too late. The bitten soldier has already been attacked. The squad leader observes everything. He thinks that if the situation continues, they'll be in serious trouble. At that moment, he orders everyone to back away from the bitten soldier. He points out that there are zombies nearby. Another soldier, surprised, asks if zombies really exist. Amid the chaos, the general orders everyone to prepare to fire. The group assumes a defensive formation. The monsters charge toward them. The soldiers begin firing their weapons. The general, though nervous, tries to stay calm. He knows he must act according to their training. Jinwoo looks ahead. He sees a zombie staring at him. He realizes it looks very human. For that reason, he hesitates to shoot. Meanwhile, that zombie starts advancing toward another soldier. The soldier next to him notices the protagonist's hesitation. He urges Jinwoo to shoot quickly. Jinwoo hurriedly fires, successfully hitting the zombie. The rest of the group also fires, trying to stop their advance. However, the group remains shocked, wondering why those creatures aren't dying. This likely means that firearms aren't effective against them. Shortly after, the general orders everyone aim for the zombies' heads. But another soldier thinks that's easier said than done. It's extremely difficult to hit a moving target. Amid the chaos, the soldier decides he must prioritize his own safety. He starts to flee and ends up bumping into another soldier. At that moment, a zombie charges at him. As a result, he is attacked. Within seconds, several monsters converge on the soldier. Meanwhile, he desperately calls out for help from his leader. At that moment, several of the zombies are taken down. It's revealed that the leader had stepped in to protect the soldier. He yells at the idiots to stop standing around. He orders them to prepare their weapons and shoot. Time passes, and the determined group continues firing at the zombies. Shortly after, another soldier asks the leader what they should do about the bitten soldiers. The leader tells them to stay together for now. Meanwhile, the soldier who fled earlier appears extremely desperate. He mutters that they should just shoot and kill anyone who's been bitten. The soldier then speaks up, declaring that the bitten man is already lost. For that reason, they should give up on him. But another soldier asks what he's saying and tells him not to spout nonsense. The other soldier insists that everyone saw the man get bitten by a zombie. He argues that they don't know when he might transform into one. Amid this tension, the soldier seems to have no other choice. But he still doesn't want to abandon one of his comrades. Shortly after, the leader appears and tells the soldier to step back for now. He reiterates that they need to be as cautious as possible. For this reason, they'll call for reinforcements and monitor the situation from a distance. At that moment, the man on the ground begins observing the other soldiers intently. It seems he's starting to transform into a monster. Shortly after, the zombie stands up. He quickly charges at the group, but in the same instant, he's shot in the head. This saves the life of the soldier closest to him. The soldier looks to the side to see who saved him. It's revealed that the protagonist fired the shot. Quickly, the group gathers around the soldier to check if he's okay. The soldier says he was saved thanks to the protagonist. For that, he wants to thank him. However, Jinwoo responds that the man is alive not because of him, but because of the leader. He explains that the leader had been observing the soldier's condition closely. At the first sign of transformation, he had given the order to shoot. For this reason, the leader had anticipated this outcome from the beginning. The general says he had hoped from the start that the man wouldn't turn into a zombie, but he had no choice but to act when it happened. Meanwhile, the protagonist mourns by the fallen soldier's body. He apologizes to him. At that moment, another soldier arrives. He announces that more zombies are approaching. They are all gathering in one area. Shortly after, the scene shifts to another location. The determined soldiers are still fighting off the zombies. However, their bullets don't seem to be making much of an impact. Even so, they can't give up. The only thing they can do is keep going. Amid the chaos, Jinwoo thinks that the monsters seem endless. He wonders if they're being drawn by the sound of gunfire. For this reason, they need to find another way to defeat them without using firearms. At that moment, Jinwoo looks to the side. He hears a cry for help. It's revealed that a group of monsters is closing in on one of the soldiers. Jinwoo quickly aims his weapon at the zombies. With a determined gaze, he observes them all. He swiftly reloads his gun. Then he fires at the approaching zombies. Successfully defeating the 3 zombies, Jinwoo reflects on how many came from just one small department. He wonders if there will ever be an end to the fight against these monsters. Time passes, and it seems all the zombies have been defeated. The protagonist group, however, is left battered and demoralized from the battle. The total of the fight is 1 dead and 2 injured. This means the injured soldiers were bitten by zombies. Amid this situation, one of the soldiers is visibly irritated. He questions what they should do next. Shortly after, the leader suggests that they need to kill the injured soldiers. He states that they delayed too long because of the last case with the bitten soldier. This hesitation puts everyone in greater danger. Meanwhile, Jinwoo watches the situation intently. The other soldiers sit down to rest. One soldier laments that they haven't even entered the department yet. He points out that they are already close to death. He questions whether they can complete the mission safely. Another soldier urges him to stop being so negative. Meanwhile, another soldier attempts to use the communication equipment. The leader asks if he has reported to headquarters. The soldier replies that he has been trying for a while. The leader instructs him to keep trying and to inform them as soon as he gets through. Then, the leader stands up and calls for everyone's attention. He explains they will divide into groups of 3. Jinwoo's group, along with 2 other soldiers, will explore floors 6 through 10. Another group will inspect the first floor and monitor the rear area for movement. The rest will join the leader to explore floors 2 through 5. After that, they will regroup with the first team to assist in exploring the upper floors. Once the leader finishes explaining, he asks if anyone has questions. Seeing no questions, he confirms the plan and orders everyone to proceed. The group quickly splits up. Jinwoo mentions that he found the elevator. However, another soldier tells him not to use it. The other team will use the emergency stairs. He explains that it's better to explore using the stairwell doors as shields rather than risk being trapped and attacked in the elevator. Following the soldier's advice, Jinwoo takes the stairs but remains uneasy. He wonders why the elevator isn't descending and assumes it's probably broken. Meanwhile, the other group reaches their designated area. They open a door but are met by several monsters. In desperation, the soldiers start firing at them. However, it's revealed that there is only one zombie. A soldier becomes frantic, saying he knew this would happen. Meanwhile, the leader and another soldier observe the situation carefully. They suspect the zombie is already dead, but decide they should shoot it in the head to be sure. The soldier does so, stating he believes the zombie is now truly dead. The group resumes entering the building. However, another soldier continues to watch the monster. The leader asks why the soldier hasn't joined them yet. The soldier replies that he's about to. As he moves, the monster suddenly begins to stir. It quickly attacks the soldier. In defense, the soldier uses his weapon as a makeshift club. He successfully strikes the zombie, hitting it multiple times to subdue it. Shortly after, another soldier returns and asks what is happening. He wants to know what's going on. The soldier, still shaken, wonders aloud if the creature was ever truly dead. The other confirms that it wasn't. The returning soldier asks if his companion is okay. The soldier assures him that he's fine now. Still, from that point forward, they agree to always shoot zombies in the head to confirm their deaths. After resolving the conflict, they resume ascending the apartment building. However, the soldier continues to dwell on what happened. Even so, he reassures himself that he's fine. Even though a zombie's teeth had just grazed his hand, he convinces himself it's no big deal. Shortly after, the scene shifts to the other group. The leader notes that there don't seem to be any zombies near the emergency exit area. For this reason, they decided to split up from that point. As discussed, Jinwoo's team would descend, while another soldier would lead his men. Additionally, it goes without saying, but protecting any survivors was to remain the top priority. Amid this situation, the soldier who had previously fought zombies was still in a state of desperation. He wondered if he was truly going to turn into a monster. However, he refused to dwell on the thought and convinced himself that everything would be fine. Time passes and the scene cuts to another location, with the protagonist standing near that same soldier. Looking back, Jinwoo notices the soldier's evident despair. Once again, the scene shifts to another location where the group appears to be outside the apartment. One soldier observes that zombies are everywhere. He picks up his radio device, stating that he will report this to the surgeon. Another soldier asks if something is wrong, and the man replies that there seems to be an issue with the signal. The scene then cuts to the other team of soldiers who are also trying to fix their communication device. The soldier examines the equipment carefully. At that moment, the device emits a loud sound. Jinwoo mentions that it might be a message from the security team. However, the soldier points out that it could just be a signal issue. Still, they decide to double-check before proceeding. The soldier sends a message through the radio requesting verification. Suddenly, the radio emits a loud, disruptive noise, drawing the attention of nearby zombies. The scene quickly shifts to another location, where a group of soldiers prepares to shoot. They declare their intent to send all the monsters to hell. The scene cuts again, this time to another group of soldiers who are trying to figure out what's happening. They recognize the noise as gunfire. It seems something is happening below, and they wonder if they should return. However, the leader tells them not to. His team will head down while they focus on clearing their current location. A soldier questions whether the leader is sure about this. If the monsters approach them, it will be extremely dangerous. The leader responds that his team has support duties and that the research mission must be completed promptly. Meanwhile, Dyu listens to the explanation and thinks the leader is right. Only once the research is finished can they return to the rendezvous point. With no other choice, the group reluctantly agrees. The leader instructs them to complete their task and return to base as quickly as possible. Hearing this, Dyu and another soldier agree and begin their mission immediately. As the group departs, the leader tells them to be cautious. He then directs his own group to follow him to execute their part of the mission. Looking back, the leader notices hesitation in one soldier. He asks if the soldier is letting fear take over. The soldier denies it. The scene shifts to another soldier who is shooting repeatedly at the remaining zombies. Still, he is visibly frustrated because he can't seem to hit any of them. Eventually, he manages to land a shot and is surprised at his success. Turning to his side, he remarks that he hopes the other soldier didn't miss that. But at that moment, the soldier tells him to look to the side. The man is shocked by what he sees. They are in serious trouble. Several zombies are now advancing toward them. Quickly, Rue prepares to fire at the oncoming horde. Amid the chaos, the soldier hopes that the other teams have heard the gunfire and are already on their way. For now, they decide to wait in the apartment. The three soldiers rush toward the building. However, one soldier trips and falls to the ground. Another soldier helps him up, asking if he's okay. Meanwhile, their other companion doesn't stop to help and continues running. The two decide to follow suit. The soldier calls out to the man ahead, instructing him to take the emergency stairs on the left. But when the man reaches the stairs, he closes the door behind him, leaving the others behind. Realizing what their companion has done, one of the soldiers becomes furious. While firing at the zombies, he demands that the man open the door immediately. However, the man on the other side refuses, saying he couldn't open the door because it would doom everyone and lead to their deaths. Even so, he wishes the two of them good luck. Hearing this, the soldier doesn't give up and continues pleading for the door to be opened. Nonetheless, the man remains firm in his decision not to comply. Amid the situation, the other soldier angrily remarks that if he ever turned into a zombie, the man would be the first person he'd kill. Shortly after, they resume firing at the approaching monsters. However, their ammunition quickly runs out. The zombies manage to reach the two soldiers, successfully attacking one of them. The attacked soldier begins transforming almost instantly. Meanwhile, his companion watches the horrifying scene unfold. More zombies appear, closing in on the remaining soldier. Trapped with no apparent way out, the soldier refuses to give up. He fights relentlessly for his survival, but the overwhelming number of zombies becomes too much, and the poor soldier cannot endure. Sometime later, the scene cuts to another location where Jinwoo's group seems to be observing something. When they open a door, they find a zombie corpse lying on the ground. Moments later, the corpse begins to move. The leader instructs a soldier to take care of the creature. However, Jinwoo asks them to wait. He explains that firing their rifles there might not be a good idea since he suspects the gunfire has been drawing these creatures' attention. Although it's just a hunch, Jinwoo argues they shouldn't take unnecessary risks. The leader agrees with Jinwoo, stating that they should only kill when absolutely necessary. For now, they begin clearing the floors systematically. Meanwhile, the zombie remains nearby. Another soldier looks at the creature while recalling his previous injury. The leader then instructs Jinwoo to guard the rear. Time passes and night falls. The leader reports that there are no zombies or survivors on floors 9 and 10. Observing the situation, Jinwoo concurs that this appears to be the case. Shortly after, two soldiers ask Jinwoo what he's talking about. Jinwoo tells them to remain silent. At that moment, a noise begins emanating from the stairs. Jinwoo quickly grabs his weapon, preparing for anything. One of the other soldiers approaches Jinwoo to see what's happening. He is stunned by what he sees. In front of them, a child is crying. At last, they find the first survivor in the apartment. A soldier asks the child for his name. The boy replies that his name is Junbin. When asked about his age, he answers that he's 4 years old. The soldier then inquires about Junbin's mother, causing the boy to cry loudly. He begins to wail uncontrollably. Another soldier urges the boy to calm down. One of the soldiers asks what they should do, and the leader responds that the child has likely been alone for a long time. However, it would be dangerous to bring him along while their mission is incomplete. Still, they can't leave the boy alone. The leader concludes that they must take the child, no matter what. Jinwoo volunteers to carry the boy, but the leader declines, pointing out that Jinwoo is the best marksman and assigns Choi to carry him instead. Additionally, they decide to leave a note stating that soldiers had taken the child in case someone comes looking for him. The leader hands the communicator to another soldier, instructing him to ensure the boy doesn't cry. The soldier asks where the leader is headed. The leader replies that he has to take care of something. Meanwhile, Jinwoo writes the note, thinking it should suffice. Elsewhere, the soldier tries to convince Junbin to come with him, talking about flying on an airplane. Eventually, the soldier manages to pick up the child. However, Jinwoo notices something alarming. The soldier has a wound on his hand, likely from a zombie bite. The soldier successfully calms the child and looks to the side, visibly confused. At that moment, the leader returns, confused by the scene before him. Jinwoo is pointing his weapon at one of their own. Jinwoo stares at the soldier's hand, demanding to know how he got that injury. The soldier nervously replies that he cut himself in the fire. Quickly, the leader approaches and asks to see the soldier's wound. However, the soldier demands that he stay back, warning him not to touch him. Moments later, the soldier points his rifle toward the child. The leader, confused, asks what he's doing and tells him to lower his weapon. The soldier, irritated, questions if the leader wants the child's brains blown out, instead demanding that they lower their guns. Observing the situation, Jinwoo comments that it's very likely the soldier was bitten by a zombie. The leader then asks the soldier to lower his weapon. He urges everyone to calm down, pointing out that even if the soldier was bitten, he hasn't transformed yet, so everything's fine for now. The soldier, frustrated, insists once again that he wasn't bitten, asking how many times he needs to repeat himself. In the midst of the tense situation, the leader tries to de-escalate, asking the soldier to calm down and lower his rifle so they can discuss the matter. The soldier retorts that the leader is going to shoot him anyway. He accuses the leader of reacting impulsively, questioning why he thinks they'd shoot him. The soldier continues, pointing out that they've all seen it happen. The sergeant shot men who were bitten by zombies. He warns them not to move, threatening to kill the child if they do. The situation grows increasingly dire and the child starts to cry. The soldier, visibly distressed, begins questioning what he's done. Suddenly, he moves toward the window. At that moment, his body starts to visibly change. The leader, alarmed, asks if something is wrong and if the man is okay. Juno quickly grabs his weapon again and asks the leader to step back. Moments later, the leader looks ahead, stunned as the soldier has already turned into a monster. Juno fires at him, visibly shaken, saying he feels terrible for doing it. He fires again, successfully taking down the creature that was once their comrade. The leader asks Jinwoo if he's okay, to which Jinwoo responds that he's fine. Juno observes the situation and comments that the child seems very scared, but is definitely unharmed. The leader places a hand on Jinwoo's shoulder, expressing his regret over what happened. But he reminds Jinwoo that they can deal with the guilt later. For now, they must leave immediately. They've already lost too much time and they need to move forward no matter what. Just then, they hear a noise coming from outside the door. The leader asks Jinwoo if he remembers what he said earlier about the elevator. He notes that the zombies seem to be drawn to gunfire, and it appears Jinwoo's observation was accurate. Zombies are now surrounding the building. The scene cuts to a staircase where two soldiers are stationed. They notice footsteps approaching and are soon joined by another soldier. One of the soldiers asks what happened and where the others are. The newcomer explains that zombies overwhelmed his team during their watch, and he was the only one who managed to escape. Moving closer to assist him, One of the soldiers asks how many zombies there were. The soldier admits he didn't get a good count, but estimates there were at least 20 or more. Suddenly, their communication device rings and a voice identifies itself as Alpha, calling for any available teams above. The scene cuts back to the apartment where a soldier is still caring for the child. Meanwhile, someone asks Jinwoo what he's doing. Jinwoo is scanning the surroundings through a gap, noting that there are around 50 zombies outside. Despite the dire circumstances, Jinwoo believes he has found an escape route. The leader quickly stands up, asking how they're going to pull it off. Jinwoo explains that the zombies seem to follow a predictable pattern. It takes them approximately 20 seconds to move between the main entrance and the emergency exit. In total, it takes about 50 seconds for them to return to their original position. Hearing Jinwoo's explanation, the leader agrees that this is a decent window of time and that they might be able to use it to escape the building. This meant they had approximately 30 seconds, or perhaps even just 20, to make their move. Jinwoo stated that this was more than enough time to reach the emergency exit, making it a viable option. The leader remarked that it was sufficient for the two of them, but expressed concern about the child. Jinwoo offered to go first and test his theory. If successful, the child and the other soldier could follow. However, the leader lightly hit Jinwoo on the head, saying he was being too full of himself that day. He decided to test the theory himself. Jinwoo warned that it could be dangerous for the leader, but the leader responded that he understood the risks and insisted that it was his responsibility as the squad leader. Moments later, the leader opened the door, ready to proceed, and with a confident smile, glanced back at Jinwoo before stepping out. The leader swiftly made his way toward the exit. He thought everything was going fine so far and reached the door, opening it successfully and signaling that they might be able to execute this plan repeatedly. He gestured to Jinwoo, who stepped out with the child, holding his hand to move quickly. Suddenly, the child's toy cart fell to the ground, creating noise that attracted the zombies. The zombies rapidly moved toward the group. The leader, desperate, closed the hallway door to hold back the monsters. He assessed the situation and realized the door wouldn't hold for long. He debated whether to block the entry or seek shelter in a secure room until help arrived. The scene shifted to Jinwoo, still inside the apartment. He'd opened a window and surveyed the area around the building. Reflecting on the situation, he wondered if previous soldiers had jumped out under similar circumstances. Jinwoo realized he needed to act quickly and make a decision. Spotting a potentially useful object nearby, he grabbed it. The scene cut back to the squad leader, who was trying to communicate with the surgeon. A transmission came through, and the surgeon acknowledged the request for assistance, stating that a rescue operation was underway. The group celebrated the news. One soldier was particularly excited about the prospect of leaving the building. Another asked if this meant they were really going to make it out. Considering the scale of the zombie threat in and around the building, the platoon alone couldn't handle them. The surgeon ordered Kim to finish the search and head to the rooftop. At that moment, a panicked soldier arrived. The leader recognized him as Kim and asked about the rest of his team. Kim revealed that Choi had been bitten by a zombie, shocking the group. He added that Jinwoo was still trapped inside with a child and needed immediate help. Sensing Kim's panic, the surgeon urged him to explain clearly to understand the situation. Kim clarified that Jinwoo was protecting a child who was at risk of being killed. The group used the radio to request updates on Jinwoo and the survivors. Shortly after, someone reported that zombies were advancing toward the front door, with their breakthrough imminent. Another leader grabbed the communication tool and told Jinwoo to wait as a rescue team was being sent. One soldier suggested rappelling down using an escape rope found at one of the windows. They asked Jinwoo if he could make it to the third floor. Jinwoo began descending with the child in his arms, moving carefully floor by floor despite the discomfort. Reaching the third floor, he scanned the area with a tense expression, readying his rifle. To his relief, there were no zombies and he felt a wave of calm. However, his relief was short-lived when he spotted something unusual, only to realize it was just cleaning equipment and nothing dangerous. The child, sensing the environment was safe, also appeared relieved. The scene shifted to another soldier watching the zombies in the corridor. Jinwoo used the communication tool to report that he had successfully reached the third floor and requested an update. The leader informed him that there were 2 zombies in the corridor and instructed him to wait for further directions. A soldier suggests they should take down the zombies, but the sergeant responds that gunfire would attract more creatures. Another soldier thinks it's not worth risking everything to save those people and proposes abandoning them. The general intervenes, stating that since there are only 2 zombies, they could eliminate them without firing. A soldier questions whether improvised weapons would be effective against the creatures. Another soldier explains that he saw Choi defeat a zombie with a rifle butt and suggests using the same method. The general asserts that the only solution is to strike the monsters' heads with sufficient force. He declares that he wouldn't force anyone to act and that soldiers were free to retreat if they weren't prepared. However, a sergeant declares he wouldn't abandon his subordinates regardless of the situation. Another soldier joins in, affirming that they still have 5 minutes and could count on him. The team decides to keep the extraction team on standby while they move forward. Despite this, another soldier remains panicked, surprised by the group's determination. The companions look at him, asking if he would join them. Kim hesitates, but soon decides he doesn't want to die that day and joins the team. The general instructs Kim to head to the rooftop and wait to report the situation if there are any delays. Kim agrees, praying for the group's safety as he climbs the stairs. As he ascends, Kim reflects on his relief at not heading directly into danger. The general takes the opportunity to check the team's equipment while explaining the plan. The scene shifts to another leader still watching the zombies in the corridor. The group advances quickly to eliminate the two zombies. The creatures notice the group and begin attacking. In the midst of the fight, the general takes responsibility for delivering the fatal blows. Soon after, the team advances with their weapons toward the zombies. They successfully take down one of the creatures. However, the other zombie is still active, though already injured. One soldier urges the others not to let the monster overpower them, saying they must hold it down together. Shortly after, the other zombie also begins advancing. One soldier realizes they must finish the job before the zombie gets any closer. They manage to land a killing blow on the zombie. Yet, another monster is still approaching. A soldier tells the sergeant that this isn't working and suggests they shoot the zombies. Amidst the chaos, the sergeant wonders if there isn't another way. Suddenly, a door slams into the zombie's face. It's revealed that Jinwoo is also present at the scene. Without hesitation, Jinwoo quickly takes his rifle and successfully shoots the zombie in the head. The group is surprised but relieved to see Jinwoo there. However, they hold back their excitement, knowing there's still one zombie left to deal with. The scene cuts to another location where a soldier is climbing the stairs. After some time, he reaches his destination. He remarks that he thought the mission was hopeless, but is glad to have made it this far. He notes that the sergeant was a tricky bastard who didn't seem to believe his earlier promises. Although the sergeant wouldn't be punished for lying, he left a bad impression. A soldier locks the door, claiming it's just a precaution to prevent anyone from entering. Unbeknownst to him, several zombies are already on the rooftop. They quickly charge at him. In a panic, the soldier tries to unlock the door, but finds it's too late. As a last resort, he draws his rifle and begins firing at the zombies around him. Unfortunately, his efforts are in vain. The soldier is overwhelmed and devoured by the zombies. As he succumbs, he desperately begs them to stop, but the transformation begins. Time passes and a helicopter arrives at the apartment. The crew inside observes the situation with relief, feeling safer above ground than below. The helicopter begins its descent. However, the area is still swarming with zombies, leaving the crew uncertain whether they can land safely. The scene shifts back to the previous corridor. The remaining zombie has been defeated. A soldier comments that being unable to shoot makes killing someone a much harder task. Another soldier tells Jinwoo to retrieve the child and bring them out. At that moment, the communication device begins transmitting another message. Soon after, the soldier picks up the communication device. He states they should perceive and address the situation directly. The soldier reports that numerous zombies are surrounding the rooftop area. He advises alerting a helicopter team about the situation. Immediately, the general takes the communication device. He requests confirmation of the estimated number of zombies on the rooftop. It is revealed that there are likely over 100 zombies. Hearing this, the general inquires about the helicopter's maximum availability time. It is declared that it is only 5 minutes. A soldier, visibly frustrated, questions how they expect to escape in such a short time frame. The general insists they respond immediately to assess the accuracy of the report. He adds that the situation doesn't make sense and suggests they could be picked up elsewhere. Another soldier speaks up, suggesting that given the circumstances, survival isn't their priority. If the situation is as bad as reported, the zombies in the surrounding area have likely overrun the location. This means the number of zombies on the rooftop is comparable to those below. Jinwoo interjects, asking what happened to the security team if zombies are in the building. The soldier responds that only Kuon had gone to the rooftop, while no one else had left. Meanwhile, the general evaluates the situation and begins walking away. The group asks where the sergeant is headed. Kim responds that they're going to the rooftop to remove the zombies from that area. The group, confused, asks how they plan to achieve this. The surgeon explains that zombies are drawn to gunfire and plans to act as a decoy. The group, frustrated, pleads with him not to take such a risk. Though they acknowledge his reasoning, they argue sacrificing himself to save everyone is unacceptable. Amid this, the general asks if they prefer to all die together instead. He reminds them that while they are soldiers, there is also a child among them. With no alternative, another soldier reluctantly agrees, asking if the surgeon has a plan. Kim explains that he intends to lead the zombies down the stairs. Once far enough from the rooftop, he'll move into a hallway, allowing them to pass while he escapes to the helicopter. He emphasizes that this seems like the best option. Jinwoo raises his hand, stating that he has an objection. He argues that the plan isn't the best course of action. In the ensuing exchange, a soldier scolds Jinwoo, telling him to know when to stay quiet. Jinwoo counters, pointing out that zombies are incredibly fast. He argues that to effectively lure them, the decoy needs to cover multiple flights of stairs quickly. He humbly suggests that he might be the fastest among them. The general responds, stating that he isn't slow either. However, Jinwoo raises the concern that there's no guarantee the stairwell is free of zombies. Faced with this, the general asks Jinwoo what he proposes. Kim responds that he would face a single zombie directly and then fire to draw others. The general questions if Jinwoo intends to act as the decoy since he is their best marksman. Jinwoo confirms, which irritates the general, accusing him of letting praise inflate his ego. The general states that a shot from the 6th floor might attract zombies from lower levels, cutting off their escape route. He refuses to let Jinwoo risk himself. Jinwoo asserts that he won't die so easily. The general demands to know if Jinwoo has a concrete plan. Kim reveals his strategy to utilize the elevator. He stresses that their priority should be to secure the 9th floor elevator via the central staircase. Meanwhile, the group encounters a zombie in the elevator and successfully eliminates it. Once the elevator is secured, they should proceed directly to the 6th floor. The group confirms via radio that the elevator has been secured. Subsequently, the sergeant, Yushui, and Bake ascend to the 10th floor using the emergency staircase. They clear the hallway and then wait near the exit. They prepare to head to the rooftop, ready to handle any remaining zombies while Jinwoo draws the bulk of them away. After the signal, the operation would begin. Shortly after, the boy looks at his watch, stating they only have 4 minutes. If the elevator didn't open within 20 seconds, things wouldn't end well. Meanwhile, a soldier is visibly frustrated, claiming the protagonist seems to think he's in charge. For that reason, he tells him to make sure he comes back alive. While observing the situation, the boy thinks everything is fine so far and the rest is now up to him. He then starts climbing the stairs. As he ascends, he seems surprised by something, hoping for the best with his fingers crossed. At that moment, the boy opens the door, finding himself face to face with numerous monsters surrounding the area. They quickly begin moving toward him. With a determined and threatening gaze, the boy observes the creatures before opening fire on them, taking them down one by one. However, when he looks ahead, he spots one of his comrades among the group, realizing it must be the one who had gone to the rooftop earlier. Aiming at his comrade, the protagonist wishes him peace and swiftly puts him down. He then unleashes multiple shots on the remaining zombies. Amid the chaos, the protagonist thinks he's done enough to draw all their attention. For that reason, it's time to lead them downstairs. The boy starts running, and the horde follows him relentlessly. With determination, he descends floor by floor. Eventually, he reaches the 6th floor, declaring it as his stop. He then shuts the door behind him, seemingly having managed to evade the monsters. Inside the room, the boy pauses, deep in thought. However, he soon notices more monsters behind him. Turning around, he is shocked to see them quickly advancing toward him. As a defensive measure, he draws his weapon. He begins firing at the cluster of zombies, determined not to die yet. Another creature rushes toward him, but it soon collapses as well. Still, 2 monsters remain alive. The protagonist activates the blade on his weapon, managing to defeat the pair and feeling relieved at his success. However, there's no time to rest as more zombies appear. The scene cuts to the 2 other soldiers from earlier who are ascending the building in the elevator. One of them speculates that Dinah must have encountered a horde of zombies there. The other remarks that he can hear it too, advising him to forget about it. One of the soldiers wonders if the protagonist might need their help, but his comrade tells him to stay silent for a moment. If they hear any noise from a zombie near the elevator doors, they'd be in serious trouble. After a brief analysis, one of them questions whether the gunfire has stopped in the area. The other theorizes that the protagonist may have drawn all the zombies to the lower floors. Suddenly, one of them recalls the protagonist telling them that if he didn't rendezvous with them within 4 minutes, they should proceed with their plan. For that reason, they decide to contact the team on the 10th floor immediately. Looking at the clock, one of them asks how many seconds have passed since the shooting started. The younger one estimates it's been about 20 seconds or more. In this tense moment, one soldier wonders if the protagonist has been caught. The other snaps at him, telling him to stop being so pessimistic. Just then, a voice calls for the elevator to be opened. Hearing it, the soldier realizes it's the protagonist. He quickly opens the elevator doors, but there's no time to relax as a horde of zombies is chasing the protagonist. He shouts for the doors to close quickly. Meanwhile, the team provides covering fire for him, shooting down as many zombies as possible. As the doors begin to close, the team successfully escapes the situation, feeling immense relief after everything that has transpired. The scene then shifts to another group ascending the stairs. At that moment, they finally reach the rooftop along with the child. Meanwhile, a helicopter is seen waiting for the entire team. One soldier asks about Soldier Kim's whereabouts and another replies that they'll put him on the line of contact. Soon after, the soldier grabs the radio device. He states they should go ahead and discuss what needs to be addressed. The soldier on the other line reports that the team on the 10th floor is proceeding to the rooftop for extraction. Hearing this, the general is pleased as it means everyone managed to survive. The scene cuts to another soldier saying they couldn't wait to share the crazy ordeal they had just been through. Meanwhile, the protagonist notices something and appears shocked. He realizes there's a swarm of zombies climbing the staircase as they're talking. Quickly, he reacts and orders everyone to ascend the stairs immediately. In the midst of the chaos, a soldier questions why they didn't remain on the 6th floor. The protagonist explains he feared the zombies might have been attracted by the sound of the helicopter. Shortly after, one of them draws his weapon. He starts shooting at the advancing zombies. Another soldier urges the protagonist to join them. However, the protagonist insists they leave him behind to hold off the zombies. Frustrated, the soldier berates him, saying he always does this and vows to kill him himself if he doesn't make it back alive. The 2 soldiers eventually reach the rooftop. Meanwhile, their comrades are anxiously waiting for them. The general, observing the situation, asks where Jinwoo is. It is revealed that Jinwoo is holding off the zombies at the staircase. The general insists they descend to help Jinwoo. However, the helicopter is already preparing for takeoff. Another soldier urges the general not to leave Jinwoo behind. Despite the plea, the helicopter begins to leave. Suddenly, they hear a sound. It's revealed that Jinwoo has managed to escape the staircase. However, a horde of zombies is still chasing him. Jinwoo starts sprinting toward the helicopter. Another soldier extends his hand to help Jinwoo on board. In a desperate leap, Jinwoo jumps toward the helicopter. Unfortunately, he misses the soldier's hand. Frustrated, the soldier laments that if he reached just a little farther, he could have saved Jinwoo. At that moment, they hear Jinwoo's voice. It's revealed there's a rope below the helicopter, and Jinwoo is clinging to it. Relieved, the soldier admits he had forgotten about the rope. Time passes, and the scene cuts to the soldiers observing Jinwoo. They remark how he's sleeping like a child after almost losing his life. Another soldier says to leave him be since he saved them all. The man clarifies he doesn't dislike Jinwoo, he's just annoyed by him sometimes. Meanwhile, the general is silently observing everything. Another soldier asks if they're heading back to the base. However, someone responds that, at the moment, the base is almost useless. Civilians are being relocated to nearby shelters, while troops are stationed near the nuclear plant. The man wonders aloud about the nuclear plant, questioning if they're close to it. The scene cuts to a location below the helicopter's flight path. A vehicle is shown driving toward a group of zombies, plowing through them. A person exits the vehicle. It's revealed to be Hyun, who laments that his shoulder is still in pain and asks why they keep bothering him. Time passes again, and the scene shifts to a group of zombies trying to break into a building. Inside, a group of civilians watches nervously. A girl remarks that those creatures are back, and a man urges her to lower her voice. He stresses the importance of staying silent. After a while, the zombies begin to wander away. The girl, still desperate, wonders aloud if someone will rescue them. The man responds that it's hard to say, as all authorities and even security companies are out of reach. At that moment, the two hear a noise. It's coming from the back door. It's revealed that several monsters are in that area. Observing the situation, the man comments that it's a mess both inside and out. At that moment, a light begins to illuminate the entire area. The scene cuts back to the earlier moment when Hyun was running over a group of zombies. Immediately after, he steps out of the vehicle, complaining again that his shoulders were killing him. Meanwhile, the monsters were not completely defeated and were starting to rise again. Defending himself, Hyun draws his knife, stating that he would end it all, as he wasn't in the mood to wait in line that day. Quickly, he manages to defeat all the zombies with ease. The two civilians watching this scene are stunned by what they've just witnessed. They are amazed that Hyun could easily defeat all those monsters. Afterward, Hyun notices something. He turns and spots the group of people from earlier. The two quickly move toward Hyun and open the door for him. Looking around, Hyun realizes he is in a pharmacy and mentions needing help from the two pharmacists. However, the two pharmacists plead for Hyun's help to get out of that place. At that moment, a zombie's hand emerges from the area. Frustrated, Hyun laments that there are even monsters in this place. He recalls everything that had happened earlier, wondering what he should do to heal his injured arm. In this situation, Hyun asks how many people were originally in that place. The pharmacist responds that, including patients and staff, there were at least 30. Hyun questions him again, asking if he's sure, to which the pharmacist insists he is. Hyun retorts that if there were 30 monsters in that place, they'd already be dead, urging him to tell the truth. The young woman responds that they're telling the truth and questions why they'd lie about it. Despite this, Hyun remains skeptical of their story but assumes they've been lucky until now. Hyun then asks where the light switch is, and the man responds that it's next to the desk. Hyun walks over and presses a button. He locks everyone inside the pharmacy. Hyun reassures them, saying that compared to what's outside, this place is a paradise. Immediately, they see several groups of zombies approaching. Hyun heads toward another area, and the girl asks where he's going. He replies that he's going to clean up the mess. Time passes, and the scene shifts to another location. A soldier appears to be directing a tank, using its power to push away some cars. Successfully, they clear the road. Soon after, more people arrive to assist. The scene changes again to a young woman approaching a military building. She calls out to the soldiers, asking if she can help. Quickly, the soldiers draw their weapons. They start shooting at the girl, who collapses to the ground. A soldier shouts for them to stop firing, insisting that she's still human. The soldiers rush to assist her, asking if she's okay. They note that everyone is on edge due to the current situation and hope she understands the mistake. Two soldiers help the girl to her feet. One notices a wound on her knee and mentions that she may have been injured by a zombie. Immediately, the soldier orders her to get down. Pointing his weapon at her, he says he won't repeat himself. Kneeling, she responds that she doesn't understand why she's being treated this way. She kneels with her hands on her head, questioning how she got the wound on her leg. Confused, the girl asks why he's asking in such a manner. The soldier responds that their lives depend on her answer. He tells her this is the last time he will ask. The girl asks if she'll be allowed to live if she answers the question. The soldier says her answer will determine whether she lives or dies. Finally, the woman responds that it's just a cut. The leader instructs another soldier to check. He confirms it's just a regular cut and shows no bite marks. Relieved, the soldier calms down. Time passes, and the scene transitions to the inside of a tent. The girl asks if they thought she was some kind of zombie. Shortly after, another soldier arrives and asks how she is feeling. He says he's relieved she wasn't bitten because if she had been, he would have had to kill her. Meanwhile, the girl begins observing the soldier. He falls silent for a moment. As he steps closer, he explains that he understands why she's upset. Handing her a drink, he tells her to consider her current situation. He explains that they see many people swear they were infected only to later turn into zombies. Still, even though she wasn't bitten, she's under observation. The girl, confused, asks what he means by that. The soldier responds that it means they're not entirely sure she won't turn into a zombie. Hearing this, Yin says she understands. As she stands up, the soldier assures her that this is just a defensive measure in case something happens. The girl asks how long this will last. The soldier responds that it will continue until he's completely convinced she hasn't been bitten by a zombie. Additionally, before moving forward, he wants to ask her a question. He asks if she had been at the purification plant the entire time. The girl confirms that she had been. She explains that she was trapped in a freezer the whole time. Everything was so cold that she couldn't hear anything. Hearing this, the soldier asks who killed the zombies inside that facility. The girl replies that it was a stranger, but she never saw him again after that. When she woke up, she was already inside the freezer. The soldier, surprised, asks if a single man really took down all those zombies. To him, it seems hard to believe. Nevertheless, he says he'll request that the girl be sent to a shelter for a while. The shelter is a professional refuge for civilians. Quickly, the girl gets up and asks if it would be possible to make a call. She explains that her parents might be sick and worried about her. However, the soldier responds that communication networks in Seoul have only been restored in very limited areas. As a result, most calls, including hers, aren't going through. Desperate, she asks if he's saying the entire city is in this state. She further questions if this means her parents are also out of contact. The soldier replies that she must have faith that her parents are safe. He adds that he's also desperate to know how his own family is doing. At that moment, an announcement is made about zombies arriving at the Olympic Expressway. The girl asks what that means. The man explains that it indicates thousands of zombies are present. He states that there are over 3 magnitudes and 7 hordes in Seoul. As for magnitudes 6 and 5, there are so many monsters that they can't be counted. Hearing this, Yin deduces that there must be more than 1 million zombies. She questions if he's saying that millions have turned into zombies in just a few days. Shortly after, the soldier leaves, instructing the girl not to leave the barracks under any circumstances. He tells her to pray for their survival. The scene then cuts to the other building from before, where many zombies are swarming the area. Meanwhile, a group of soldiers is trying to hold them off, taking down one after another. However, the sheer number of zombies remains overwhelming, leaving much work to be done. Time passes and the last zombie is finally defeated. The soldier orders a ceasefire. Afterward, Yin appears at the scene, stunned by the sight of countless bodies on the ground, all zombies. Looking to the side, a soldier notices the girl and asks if she's okay. Yin collapses to the ground, devastated by what she's seen. The soldier remarks that it's disturbing, and if she's worried about her loved ones, it might seem like the world is ending. However, he advises her to save her tears for later because she'll be leaving soon. As for him and his men, they will have to remain there, fighting these monsters. Surprised, the girl asks if they fight like this every day, especially with such a small number of men. The soldier admits that he should have at least 120 men under his command, but as she can see, most of them have turned into those things. The girl questions why he isn't taking his men to the purification plant, noting that it might be even more dangerous than staying here. The man responds that it was true. He couldn't make that call to someone else because he had to guard the road and set up a barricade to maintain their position. That's why they couldn't hide in the plant. Amid this situation, the girl asks who had been crazy enough to give him such an order. The soldier responds that it came from someone far above his rank. Yang replies that even so, the order didn't make any sense. The soldier explains that with Gyeongsang province in the mix, they had over 30,000 troops securing the facilities, as per Brest directives, and the protocols were extremely strict. For that reason, they had no choice but to follow them. After all, they were soldiers and as such could be considered expendable. Still, the girl says it didn't make sense. Shortly after, a helicopter appears and the soldier mentions that he's more concerned about whether they'll let her hitch a ride. He advises her to forget everything she's seen once she reaches the shelter. Having no choice, the girl reluctantly agrees. Sometime later, the helicopter lands and the soldier is surprised, stating that he never thought he'd see a survivor make it out of that hell. Observing the situation, the man says she's one lucky lady. He begins examining her injured leg, asking if she's hurt. The soldier responds that it's a minor injury, not a bite. The soldier adds that whether it's a bite or not, they must follow protocol. He acknowledges her frustration, but insists that she wait for at least 20 minutes. Time passes, and the girl finds herself fully restrained, immobilized in the helicopter. Shortly after, the soldier asks her to stay calm, explaining that on the first day, a rescued civilian turned mid-flight. That's why they implemented preventive measures. He's surprised they even allowed her to board, given the circumstances, and emphasizes how significant it is for her to reach the shelter. He advises her to temporarily relinquish her rights to ensure her survival. The soldier then disembarks from the helicopter as it begins to take off. Time passes, and the helicopter approaches its destination. The pilot asks his companion to look below, noting an immense group of monsters. The man wonders if those creatures might have some intelligence and asks why his companion thinks that. After all, there must be a reason for those idiots to cluster so tightly. The girl observes the horde of zombies and suddenly remembers something. A flashback shows a man giving a lecture, explaining that the creatures concentrate around a central mass nicknamed the Mother, while others spread out in all directions to expand the radius. He adds that this movement forms a circular pattern and asks if anyone has any suggestions about this behavior. Yang raises her hand, suggesting that the inherent instinct of bacterial organisms is motility for spreading. The scene cuts back to the present, with a helicopter still flying over the area. Beloved Jinwoo's friends remain in the building from before. Time passes and the scene shifts to the previous character, stating he could eat a horse at that moment. He rummages through a box, noting they were running low on water and remarking how bad that was. He says they could manage hunger for a while, but running out of water was another matter entirely. The sheriff tells him to stop talking nonsense and grab his weapons. They needed to head to the center to try and escape and find something to eat. The group is shocked, questioning if they're really going outside. Amid the tension, you ask the sheriff to wait and questions whether he has a plan. The sheriff responds that he doesn't have the luxury of making a complicated plan. It's been nearly 2 days since they last ate, and the logistics center is just a few blocks away with plenty of food stores. For that reason, they need to move, and if they encounter any zombies, they'll just beat them down. Hearing this, he was astonished, pointing out they've been incredibly lucky so far, but he adds that they can't count on that luck lasting much longer. Except for the sheriff, they were all weaker compared to the zombies, and moreover, they were outnumbered. This meant they needed to plan their movements more carefully. The sheriff said he would listen to their plans, but they couldn't just stand there doing nothing until they died. He replied that it didn't hurt to be cautious, suggesting they find a good vantage point to scout the area, or perhaps even set traps along their route. Amid the situation, Samsic was surprised, commenting that it felt like a video game. Shortly after, the sheriff said he didn't know if he could fight if he got hungrier. For that reason, they needed to act before it came to that. Then Samsic asked why they didn't give you a chance, pointing out he had played well in all positions before. Besides, the sheriff had always been dead weight. Meanwhile, another member of the group was quietly watching the discussion about games. Shortly after, the sheriff changed the subject, asking you if he had a specific place in mind to set the traps. You responded with just a smile. Time passed, and the scene shifted to the group setting up traps at a specific location. You thought it was time to rig the wires. Next, they would install pipes for the finishing touch. This way, when the zombies tripped, their heads would be struck by the setup. You said they would hammer along that line. The group began setting up the traps again. As time passed, you estimated that the trap was sufficient to kill 3 or 4 zombies. Shortly after, Samsic asked what would happen if a human, other than themselves, got caught in the trap. The sheriff questioned the likelihood of anyone else being there besides them. Samsic replied that it was impossible to know, as a random person might stumble into the area and get hurt. Observing the situation, you admitted Samsic had a point. So they decided to leave a sign to warn intelligent humans. Shortly after, you noticed an empty soda can nearby. Time passed, and they had finished marking the area for humans by placing some soda cans to signal potential danger. This significantly reduced the chance of anyone getting hurt. Seeing this, Samsic commented that it was practically perfect. You agreed, saying the traps were good to go, and they could leave. When he asked the time, Samsic realized it was getting a bit late. However, since it was still daylight and there were no zombies in sight, it meant they were in decent conditions for a run. He said that instead of proceeding that day, they would just scout the area and nothing more. This way, they could estimate the monster population. After that, they would check for more survivors and plan accordingly. Shortly after, you gave the signal to move. Time passed, and the scene shifted to the group on the bridge from earlier. They started walking toward their destination to analyze the situation. Amid the situation, the sheriff commented that the silence was scarier than anything else. Samsic replied that as far as he knew, there had been many more bodies in the area before. Shortly after, you told them not to lower their guard and to remain alert at all times. At that moment, the group heard a noise. The sheriff told them not to panic, assuring them he could handle it alone. However, if there were more than 7 zombies, it wouldn't be so easy. Samsic said that even though they were weak, they would support him at all costs. You agreed, stating that there was no need to rely on luck. Besides, being hungry was better than being dead. The sheriff responded that if he weren't so hungry, he could easily take down many of those zombies without a problem. At that moment, Samsic noticed a vending machine nearby. He mentioned it was a relief because there were still plenty of drinks in it. Samsic asked if anyone had any money. However, the sheriff replied they didn't need money to get what they wanted. Shortly after, he told the group to step back, saying he would get some cans himself. At that moment, he began preparing with his weapon. Shortly after, the sheriff struck the vending machine. However, nothing happened. The group was very surprised by what they saw. Additionally, the machine made a very loud noise. Observing the situation, you commented that the noise was a bit too loud. The sheriff admitted it startled him, as he didn't expect vending machines to be so noisy. He then tried to break it more quietly. However, even after repeated hits, the machine remained intact. Seeing this, Yu said it would be just as problematic if they didn't have anything to drink. With the traps already set, it might be better to leave and return before any zombies showed up. Hearing this, the sheriff grabbed his weapon again. He delivered another blow to the machine, causing an even louder noise. However, this time they successfully broke it open. The group quickly grabbed the drinks from the machine. They were overjoyed to finally have something to drink. The sheriff suggested taking the tools out of the bag and filling it with as many drinks as possible. Time passed as they packed the bag. The sheriff said it was enough as he didn't think he could carry more. Samzik asked if he wanted him to head back to the base and grab another bag. Yu reminded them they had come to scout the area, not just for supplies. Samzik agreed but pointed out it was too risky to head directly into the center. Yu then suggested climbing to a vantage point to analyze the situation from above. Time passed and the group headed toward a nearby building. However, there were still many challenges they had to face along the way. Looking at the ground, they noticed a trail of ketchup. Yu remarked it looked like someone who had been bitten entered the building. Samzik observed that it likely meant there was a zombie inside. The sheriff surveyed the building. He mentioned they didn't know what was inside but should be prepared for any monster that might come near their supplies. Yu placed a soda can on the ground. He explained this would alert them if any zombies entered the area. The group then entered the building. As they climbed the stairs, the sheriff remarked that the power was out, making it completely dark. He asked Samzik if he could borrow his lighter, and Samzik handed it over. The sheriff lit the lighter. Approaching an apartment door, he noticed the trail leading in that direction and wondered if someone had entered. Samzik leaned in to listen at the door. He quickly heard a noise. He confirmed there was a zombie inside, and Yu pointed out there were other routes to the rooftop. Additionally, the noise could attract more zombies, complicating things. The sheriff insisted they should just defeat the monster and move on. Since he was ready, they could open the door. The group counted down before opening the door. Inside, they found a dark hallway. Fear gripped the group as they heard a sound. The sheriff said the noise was coming from the last room. He speculated that someone who had encountered the monster might have been bitten. The group cautiously moved toward the sound. The sheriff rushed toward the noise. Yu tried to stop him, warning that barging in was a bad idea. Suddenly, a zombie emerged beside Yu. The sheriff barely managed to defend against the attack. He admitted he was startled. Another zombie appeared shortly after. The sheriff deftly dodged its attack. His friends asked if he was okay. The sheriff told them to stay put. Then he attacked the zombie again, successfully killing it. The group pressed on. As they walked down the hallway, Yu opened a door. He carefully scanned the room. Samzik and the sheriff remained on high alert for any threats. Yu opened another door. Inside, they encountered two more zombies. The sheriff quickly charged at them. He managed to kill one successfully, and shortly after, the other zombie charged at the sheriff. Meanwhile, Yu observed the situation. He then grabbed his hammer and attacked the zombie, managing to take it down. Afterward, Yu became lost in thought. The sheriff reassured him, saying he did what needed to be done. It was just a zombie after all. Time passed, and the scene shifted to the group standing on the rooftop, observing the streets below. Yu pointed out that the roads were completely clogged, making it possible to move only by jumping from car to car. Additionally, it wasn't just the main roads. Alleys and subway passages were also packed. Realizing it was nighttime, they decided to call it a day and head back to base. Time passed again, and the scene cut to the group successfully returning to their base. Meanwhile, Yu watched the sheriff, reflecting that they couldn't escape without taking significant risks and couldn't find equipment safely. This left them in a dire situation. Samzik, watching the situation, wondered what the best way was to defeat those monsters. The sheriff admired Samzik's bold attitude, stating that even though he was weak, he still thought things through. The two began to bicker, and Samzik explained that he was only doing it to ensure they survived. Listening to their argument, Yu smiled and assured them they would make it out together. For that reason, they would survive together and eventually reunite with Jinwoo. The scene then shifted to a military location. A soldier from before had arrived, insisting that the woman should be placed in quarantine. Another soldier climbed into a helicopter, stating he was going to retrieve more ammunition. Time passed again, and the scene transitioned to a quarantine area. The girl from before appeared to be imprisoned there. She couldn't believe they had placed her in quarantine in such a cell. She wondered why the soldiers were doing this to her. She recalled what the soldier had explained, that quarantine was just part of the admission process for that facility. The procedure required 24 hours for citizens without visible wounds and 48 hours for those with visible injuries. It was a standard process for everyone entering the facility, so she shouldn't worry too much. Still, the current reality was driving Yin crazy. Suddenly, an unfamiliar girl began speaking, advising Yin not to let the cage get into her head. She admitted she was upset when told she'd have to stay there for 2 days. However, she joked that the time had passed quickly, even though she still had a few hours left. Yin thanked her for the advice. She also noticed the girl was barefoot and observed her pinky toe was injured. The one explained it was because a car had run over it. At that moment, Yin realized something and asked if the girl appeared on TV often. The woman removed her hat, revealing she was a TV idol. She added that she thought they would get along during quarantine. She asked Yin how long she had been there. Yin replied it had been 2 days. Changing the subject, the idol mentioned the cookies were good and that things hadn't been so bad. Yin thanked her, thinking she had assumed the girl was just a pretty face. but she seemed to be a kind person. Looking down, Yin asked what had really happened to her toe. The idol explained that someone had hit her with a car and hadn't even stopped to help. Given the circumstances, she just had to endure it. She mentioned that dancing might be challenging now, but she could still sing and continue her career. After speaking with the girl, Yin reflected on her own frustration. She realized she had resented the very people who saved her. The idol noted the soldiers had assured her that things would return to normal sooner than expected. She knew it was incredibly difficult, but they had to hold on until that day came. Noticing the idol's trembling hand, Yin reached out and held it. She assured her they could face it together. The scene then cut to Junwoo's group asking another man to throw the rope down. Shortly after, Yu said that the guy should be doing something, so they needed to wait a bit. Samsik suggested that the man might have fallen and been caught by the zombies. At that moment, Yu picked up a soda can. He threw it toward the upper floor. The others were immediately irritated, saying the noise could have attracted the zombies. Suddenly, the group heard a noise coming from the upper floor. It was revealed to be the same guy from before, saying he had grabbed more drinks. The sheriff asked him to lower the rope, but the man replied that he was checking to make sure they hadn't brought any zombies with them. After a moment, he began lowering the rope, stating he hadn't seen anything suspicious. Meanwhile, the sheriff thought it would be better to install a ladder or something next time since they couldn't rely on that guy. The man then asked why they had come back suddenly, assuming they had planned to leave him behind. The sheriff retorted that he had no right to talk as he had taken hours to lower the rope. The man defended himself, saying not to make assumptions, but anyway, he wanted one of the sodas. The sheriff, irritated, declared there was nothing for him. However, the man pointed out that the bag was clearly full of cans. Samsik interjected, saying none of them were for the man. The guy pleaded for them not to be so stingy, promising to be faster with the rope next time. Meanwhile, Yu looked to the side, remarking that they should deal with those monsters the next day. Time passed, and the next day arrived, with the group still wondering if the man would take long to lower the rope. Eventually, the group set up a ladder at the spot. It seemed they were giving instructions to the man above. Afterward, the group began clearing the zombies from the area, with even the man helping. Samsik noted that if they didn't, they'd end up trapped under a pile of corpses. In the midst of it, the man declared that he definitely wouldn't die like this. Samsik replied that everyone dies eventually, the only question is when and where. The sheriff stood up, saying he would help. But Yu intervened, insisting he conserved his strength for escorting them again since he was their strongest fighter. For that reason, he should take on less strenuous tasks. The sheriff agreed and called the man to join him. After some time, the group seemed to have finished their task but now needed to burn the pile. Irritated, Samsik complained about how heavy the monsters were. Yu agreed, remarking that moving them had been incredibly difficult due to their weight. But the most unsettling part was having to handle the piles of corpses. Even after their transformation, they still looked very human. Samsik set fire to the monsters. At that moment, Samsik noticed something, observing that the ground beneath the bodies was surprisingly clean. He remarked that he had expected much more blood when they removed the corpses. He speculated that the blood must have dried or evaporated when they transformed. Yu agreed, noting that although they might look like rabbits on the inside, they were entirely different creatures and shouldn't be underestimated. Samsik admitted he understood they were zombies, but he doubted he had the stomach to do this a second time. The scene shifted to the group back at their base. Meanwhile, they seemed to be fiddling with the phone. One of them tried to get a signal. Soon after, the man looked very surprised by what he saw. Yu quickly reached for the phone, urging him to check for updates from around the world. But the man asked for some space to breathe. He opened YouTube to check the news. A report appeared featuring a woman stating that the authorities were actively collaborating with the military to address the crisis. She explained that the unknown virus was spreading globally and that the country was making progress in containing it. Experts cautiously predicted a resolution to the situation by the following week, advising people to hold on a little longer. In the midst of the situation, the other guy remarked that it didn't make much sense and suggested they should look directly at the chat. None of the people there seemed happy about the news, as it didn't seem believable. Yu began reviewing all the news in silence. Shortly after, the scene shifted to the group on the terrace. The sheriff asked Yu what he thought about the earlier chat discussions, as people were saying the news was completely false. Yu responded that he believed there was some credibility, stating that if things had truly improved, the news would have shown photos to reassure citizens. The sheriff admitted he didn't understand why so many lies had been spread. Meanwhile, Samsik was observing something through the device from before. At that moment, he asked the sheriff what time it was. The sheriff replied it was 4:34, adding that he hoped the zombie apocalypse wasn't ruining any plans he had with someone. Samsik, surprised, asked how the sheriff knew, saying he had been thinking about going out for drinks with someone and wondered if the sheriff wanted to tag along. After that, Samsik returned to observing the zombies and asked the sheriff for the exact time again. The sheriff gave him the time and asked why Samsik was spying on all those people. It was revealed that Samsik was watching people he had known before who had apparently already become monsters. After observing everything, Samsik stated there were 21 people he knew who had turned into monsters. The sheriff walked away, remarking that Samzik had found something new to fixate on. He thought it might be time to give up on the city's center and try his luck on the road to see if they could find something useful. However, he pointed out that zombies might be waiting behind vehicles. Therefore, they should follow the railroad tracks. The sheriff argued he wasn't sure they'd find food along the way, and if they ventured too far, they might end up spending the night there. At that moment, Samzik noticed something and called the group, saying he thought he had found a way to locate more food. He threw his cigarette to the ground, claiming they could pretend it was a person moving back and forth in the area. There were 7 zombies in total that moved like that, but 5 of them remained stationary, each accompanied by 2 or more zombies. Samzik explained that while some zombies roamed occasionally, they eventually joined the other group. You ask how Samzik had figured that out. Samzik said Young-suk's group passed first, but after 4 other groups, they appeared again with their group. It took about 9 minutes for Young-suk to arrive, followed by Mayan's group, making it 11 minutes in total. And so it went on. This meant they could clear the apartment in the center during the longer interval between groups. The sheriff asked Samzik if he said there were 7 stray zombies. Samzik confirmed, saying 20 minutes would be enough to take them down. He reminded the sheriff not to forget the time needed to pass through the underground tunnels. They couldn't move until the last zombie disappeared from sight. You suggested verifying Samzik's calculations. Thus, Young-suk's group should appear in 5 minutes. The scene shifted to a group of zombies appearing. Samzik confirmed that the girl was there just as he said. You checked the time, confirming the next group should appear in 9 minutes. Time passed, and Samzik's calculations were confirmed. However, there was a slight margin of error for each group, but it was clear they could rely on his theory. The group planned to move around 5:58 to synchronize with the other group. The precise time arrived. The group was prepared for any battle. They began descending through the tunnel again. When the moment came, you announced that the zombies were arriving. Immediately, the monsters noticed the group, and within seconds, the sheriff charged one of the monsters, quickly taking it down. Another monster charged at him, but the sheriff delivered another blow. Yet another appeared. The sheriff moved swiftly, striking another attack. Meanwhile, you assisted the sheriff in the fight. Soon after, you landed a strike on another zombie. At that moment, another zombie appeared in front of you. However, Samzik was also there, preparing to attack. Unfortunately, his attack didn't seem very effective. Looking to the side, the zombie turned towards Samzik, but you appeared just in time to help the boy. He asked if he was okay. However, there wasn't any time to think. At that moment, a zombie charged at you. It seemingly managed to bite him somehow. But within seconds, Samzik had already arrived to save you, stating that it could try to bite him, but it wouldn't harm his friends. Approaching you, Samzik asked if he had been bitten. You, in turn, replied that he wasn't sure. He also admitted that he genuinely thought he was going to die that time. In the midst of the situation, Samzik blamed himself for messing up, but you reassured him, saying it was fine and that now Samzik owed him one. Meanwhile, the sheriff was taking down multiple monsters at once. He had apparently already dealt with all the creatures. The sheriff declared that he was certain he had finished off every last one of the monsters. He asked what time it was. It was revealed that they had finished 5 minutes earlier than planned. For that reason, they decided to search the area before more monsters arrived. Shortly after, the scene shifted to the group scavenging for food. Samzik noted that 4 minutes had already passed. It became clear they needed to leave soon. Nevertheless, the food they had gathered seemed enough to last for a while. At that moment, the sheriff looked to the side. The group suddenly heard a noise. Samzik glanced around and noticed that windows were opening. Meanwhile, a desperate group of people began shouting, asking if they were there to rescue them. A massive number of people appeared, frantic to escape. The group observed in shock, realizing that all these people were survivors. The survivors began begging them for food. The sheriff remarked that it seemed like a sizable group was there. They thought the group might be a rescue team or something similar. Checking the time, you noted that they had no choice but to leave. There were only 5 minutes left before the next group of zombies arrived. The sheriff then shouted, declaring they weren't a rescue team. They were just scavenging for food. The survivors grew furious, saying they couldn't just leave like that. They demanded that the group at least leave some food for them. The survivors looked at the empty street and decided to chase after them, believing they deserve at least a share of the food. Everyone began scrambling to grab what they could from the group. Somehow, they claimed to know of a place that might be safe. Quickly, another group broke into a store to search for food. Samzik, taken aback, asked if there were truly so many people in the neighborhood. You replied that everyone must have been sheltering in nearby buildings. Chaos filled the streets. In the midst of the turmoil, the sheriff warned that zombies would be arriving at any moment. Samzik urgently pleaded with everyone to return to their buildings. The monsters would soon arrive. However, the crowd didn't seem to care. All they wanted was something to eat. Then, a woman approached. She asked Samzik if he could spare some food because her son hadn't eaten in days. Hearing the woman's plea, Samzik was visibly shaken and silent. Soon after, a group of people broke a window. Samzik, without a word, dropped the bag of food. The woman quickly grabbed the bag and ran away. One of the others mentioned a larger market a block away. They suggested heading there next. The sheriff intervened, saying it was too dangerous to go there. They would likely be killed. He then asked you for the time. You answered it was already 5-6 p.m., leaving only 1 minute to spare. At this rate, everyone would be killed. The sheriff urged them to leave immediately. They couldn't afford to be dragged into the crowd like those people. Seeing Samzik's hesitation, the sheriff insisted they leave and let the others fend for themselves. You silently observed the situation. Samzik was deep in thought about everything happening around him. Even so, he eventually agreed to leave. The group quickly began running back to their base. Suddenly, someone grabbed Samzik's hand. They pleaded desperately, saying they truly needed him and absolutely required his help. The sheriff rushed at the man, demanding he let go of Samzik. They firmly stated they weren't there to rescue anyone. The man held on tightly to Samzik, insisting that they knew something the others didn't. He begged the group to escort him just 2 blocks. His car was parked just ahead. The sheriff struck the man, demanding he release Samzik immediately. The man then pleaded not to do it, promising he would make it up to them if they helped. Shortly after, you checked his watch again, noting that only 30 seconds remained. Immediately, the sheriff landed another punch on the man, causing him to fall to the ground. You told the sheriff he shouldn't have hit him, but the sheriff replied that he didn't think the man would get hurt that badly. Suddenly, an unfamiliar woman appeared. Another man urged her to just run. However, she ignored him, asking if the injured man was okay. Observing the situation, the sheriff remarked that the man shouldn't have riled him up like that. At that moment, the group noticed something. The entire street echoed with the sound of monsters. It was revealed that the zombies had already arrived at the location. They began attacking the people nearby, devouring them quickly. The panicked group tried to flee, but seemed futile. The sheriff, witnessing the chaos, declared that they needed to leave immediately. Meanwhile, the woman continued trying to wake the man. She then began dragging him along. The sheriff, watching, decided to carry the man on his back. He stated that it wouldn't be possible to bring them to their hideout. Instead, they should head to where the woman had been hiding earlier. She pointed to a location nearby, saying that's where they had been hiding. At that moment, the monsters appeared. Samzik urged them to skip the chatter and start running. The desperate group followed the woman toward the hideout. She led them to an alley ahead. Shortly after, she entered the location and began climbing some stairs. Finally, they arrived at the designated spot. However, the woman realized something was wrong. The door wouldn't open. At that moment, Samzik opened a window and looked down. He saw a massive horde of monsters advancing toward them. It was clear that the monsters would soon enter the alley. The group grew increasingly desperate, but the sheriff remained determined. He called out to the people inside, demanding that they open the door. However, someone inside told them to go elsewhere, stating they didn't want trouble. Confused, the sheriff asked what they were talking about, thinking the woman was with them. She confirmed that was true, but explained that they only had enough food for a few more days. Meanwhile, Samzik continued watching the monsters through the window, noting that they were getting closer. Frustrated, the sheriff handed the injured man to the woman, saying she should hold him while he dealt with the people inside. The sheriff prepared to break down the door, stating that if it didn't open, they would all die together. He struck the door with great force. The people inside watched in panic as the door began to crack under the impact. A woman inside, realizing they had no choice, told the others to just open the door. The group complied, and the sheriff noticed the door had been unlocked. But the horde of zombies had already reached the bottom of the stairs. They began climbing quickly. Samzik and the sheriff stayed behind to hold off the monsters, fighting them off one by one. They shouted for the others to enter the room, saying it was their chance. The two quickly ran through the door, and you immediately began closing it. However, a zombie managed to grab the door. The sheriff rushed forward, telling you to duck. He delivered a decisive blow to the monster, forcing it to release the door. With that, they successfully secured the area. Relieved, the sheriff admitted he thought it was the end for them. He turned to check on the others. The woman thanked them for their help, saying they were fine. Samzik assured her there was no need to worry. You pointed out that the sheriff should be the one apologizing, but the sheriff argued it wasn't fair, stating they were in trouble earlier. The group then asked if they were planning to stay there long, mentioning that they had opened the door for them. However, they also emphasized they didn't have much food. One of the residents sarcastically asked if they hated their stay so much, why not open the door again and leave? Another clarified that wasn't what they meant. The sheriff replied that they wouldn't touch their supplies, but they needed to rest there for a little while. He questioned if that would really bother them so much. Time passed again, and shortly after, the man woke up. Meanwhile, the sheriff seemed to be talking to the woman. The man, noticing the sheriff, became very irritated. The sheriff, confused, asked what was wrong with him. The woman quickly clarified that it wasn't what he thought, explaining that the sheriff had actually offered her some food. The man looked puzzled. It was revealed that the sheriff had given her something to eat. The man apologized, admitting that ever since the world had fallen apart, he had stopped trusting other people. The sheriff said it was fair since he had hit the man first, so now they were even. The man commented on the sheriff's strong punch, asking what kind of work he did. Samzik joked, saying the sheriff worked for Dai Hong's construction company. Shortly after, Samzik put on a jacket, stating that they all worked under the project coordinator, Kan Nan Shu. He added that the money they earned was quite good. The man admitted it was the first time he heard of that group in Seoul, and was surprised to learn about groups he hadn't known about. Regardless, he had something to ask if they didn't mind. He explained that his car was just 1 or 2 blocks away, and he needed to rescue it and his sister. He promised to give them everything he had once they reached the location. He called it a good deal, to be honest, but the sheriff responded that he didn't get it. No matter how valuable the car might be, money no longer mattered in this world. Moreover, the nearby roads were completely congested, making passage impossible. The man, surprised, asked if they had seen it all. Samzik confirmed, saying they had checked from the roof of an abandoned station. The man, even more surprised, mentioned that they had passed through the closed station, noting that the surrounding area was entirely blocked. For that reason, he wanted to know where they were staying and if it was safer than the current place. The sheriff, visibly annoyed, told the man he had an infuriating talent for not listening. He firmly stated that it was the same mess everywhere and no place was truly safe. However, the man insisted that wherever they were staying must be better than the hell they were experiencing now. Later, he spoke to Samzik, suggesting he take a break from watching the area. It was probably difficult to see anything clearly at night, but Samzik replied that he could see everything perfectly. At that moment, you heard a noise. He looked down through the window, and Samzik pointed out that the group of zombies from before was roaming the area again. He also noted another group of monsters nearby that they hadn't seen before. This suggested that the number of monsters had likely increased. However, their movement patterns seemed unchanged. You, surprised, asked if Samzik could really see all that. Samzik confirmed, adding that perhaps he had better vision than most. You, uncertain, remarked that he wasn't sure if they could fully trust Samzik's eyesight. In response, Samzik just smiled. Time passed and morning arrived. Samzik was still observing the movements of the monsters. He calculated that it took about 6 minutes for the groups to complete a full round and 10 minutes for the next group, suggesting they could anticipate some variety. Samzik asked what would happen if the monsters on the stairs were still there. The sheriff replied that he hadn't seen them during his last check. However, they still needed to address that issue. The real problem was the ones in the street. It wouldn't be possible to take them all down. Instead, they should only disperse those that got too close. Samzik asked what they should do with the food since they couldn't fight while holding the bags. At that moment, another person appeared, offering a backpack. They suggested taking it and leaving quickly. And after that, they should never return. The sheriff, irritated, said he would never trust those people again. He then began packing the items into his backpack. Additionally, he told the other man that he would leave some items for him and his sister. Shortly after, Jill asked if they were really determined to leave that place. The man replied that waiting there while they were about to die wasn't an option, so they had to do something. Samzik said he respected that but was worried about his sister, asking if he thought she could really carry the food for 2 kilometers back to their base. The woman replied that it shouldn't be a problem since she regularly exercised. The sheriff then grabbed his weapon, stating that if that was the case, they should leave immediately. The scene cut to a zombie wandering through an area. Meanwhile, Yu was observing everything closely. He quickly opened the door and the sheriff advanced toward the zombie. He managed to finish it off. Yu then instructed everyone to run. They began descending the stairs. Samzik mentioned that there was another zombie at the entrance and that they should be careful. The sheriff quickly went after the creature, striking it down. He then retrieved his weapon again. Shortly after, they exited the building. Looking to the side, the man spotted something. A new group of zombies was approaching. Yu said they couldn't stop for anything and needed to start running. Meanwhile, the sheriff was still clearing out zombies, commenting that they never seemed to end. Yu reassured him that they would handle any the sheriff couldn't manage, so he should keep clearing the path. The sheriff quickly advanced, urging the group to stay behind him. Yu observed that there were more zombies on the neighboring streets and thought they might not have heard all the noise they were making. But even so, they should be able to get through without major problems. Suddenly, Yu heard a sound. Looking up, he was shocked. It was revealed that several zombies had started falling from the buildings. The monsters quickly closed in on the group. They seemed trapped. The sheriff, surprised by the situation, exclaimed that they couldn't turn back and had to keep moving forward. Yu said these must have been people who had hidden in those buildings and turned into zombies. The sheriff added that those people, even after death, were causing problems. Again, Yu heard another sound. Meanwhile, one of the men seemed to be in trouble. A zombie had lunged at him, but he barely managed to dodge. He fell to the ground, desperately calling for help. The zombie was closing in on him. Yu quickly rushed to his aid, landing a blow on the zombie. However, it wasn't very effective. The woman then kicked the zombie. Yu struck it again, successfully finishing it off. The woman asked if the man was okay. Yu thanked her, saying he was fine. The man began running frantically, insisting they leave immediately. He mentioned that he needed to grab his bag because his phone was inside and it had important contacts. He couldn't afford to lose it, no matter what. The man retrieved his bag with his smartphone, but more zombies appeared, swarming him. Yu and the woman watched the scene unfold. Samzik grabbed Yu's hand, urging him to leave, saying they would all die if they went back now. Yu was visibly frustrated, watching the man being devoured. The woman also observed but was powerless to act. Yu, though angered by the situation, told the woman to come with him. They started running. Meanwhile, the sheriff was ahead, clearing the way. The women followed between them, running. However, there were still zombies closing in from behind. The sheriff quickly yelled for them to duck. He struck another zombie, defeating it. He eliminated all the zombies in the immediate vicinity. Time passed, and the scene transitioned to the base of the previous group. Thus, they found themselves at the fence they had built earlier. Afterward, they began climbing over it to get back to their base. At that moment, you started climbing the fence but ended up falling shortly after. Meanwhile, the girl managed to jump over the fence effortlessly. She approached you, asking if he was okay. The sheriff, surprised, commented that she wasn't kidding when she said she exercised regularly. You then urged everyone to move quickly, saying they needed to return to the base. However, Samzik asked them to wait a moment because they needed to retrieve the bag with their drinks. The sheriff, surprised, asked if Samzik was trying to get himself killed. Samzik replied that they'd die anyway if they didn't bring the supplies. In that situation, you agreed with Samzik, saying they should act quickly. Soon after, the group worked together to retrieve the bag. They started running across the bridge they had crossed earlier, approaching the trap they had previously set up. They passed through it successfully. The group felt relieved to have reached a safer area. Meanwhile, the girl seemed lost in thought. The sheriff asked how she was holding up, expressing his condolences about her brother. He added that while he couldn't replace her real brother, he could protect her from that point forward. Samzik, observing the situation, remarked that the sheriff shouldn't make promises he couldn't keep. The sheriff told him to stop because the girl might misunderstand his intentions. He added that he would never fall for someone he had just met. Samzik replied, saying he thought the sheriff was utterly in love with Jenny. Confused, the sheriff denied it, questioning why Samzik was even bringing her up. At that moment, the girl removed her cap and formally introduced herself as Jenny. The group was stunned by this revelation. However, Samzik claimed he had known all along, saying it was obvious from the start. He mentioned that the person who had died earlier likely wasn't her real brother. Jenny confirmed this, explaining that the man was actually the executive director of their agency. Nonetheless, he had treated them like real sisters from the beginning, which was why she cared deeply for him. The sheriff apologized and asked if he could inquire about the other girl, who was always by her side. Jenny began to cry, explaining that her friend had died on the first day trying to help a child. She added that the director had warned her it was likely a lost cause. A flashback from 4 days earlier appeared, showing 2 girls sleeping. Suddenly, a man entered the room. Jenny woke up and asked why he was knocking like that and what time it was. The director replied that the time wasn't important and urged them to get up and change clothes immediately. The other girl asked what happened and if something was wrong, noting that he was acting as if a war was starting. The director, frustrated, asked if she preferred to be in a war instead of where they were. He said they'd be in big trouble if they didn't reach the Han River within 30 minutes. The girl, shocked, asked what he meant. The man, who seemed unwell, insisted he would explain everything on the road but urged them to hurry up and get ready. He then answered a call saying he'd arrive in 30 minutes as it was plenty of time. However, it seemed their plans had already changed. Meanwhile, the other girl asked what she should wear. The director told her to forget about it, promising to buy her a truckload of new clothes later, which would be much better than what she had now. He ended the call, glanced over, and saw the girls still getting dressed. Frustrated, he told them to hurry up. He added that they could put on shoes later and finish changing in the car since they needed to leave immediately. The girls, still observing the situation, wondered what was really happening. Soon after, the scene cuts to the previous group in a parking lot, where they were hastily trying to escape. The director urged the girl to hurry up again, but shortly after, she dropped her shoe. At that moment, she stopped to pick it up. Looking to the side, she noticed a crying child. Approaching the child, she asked if they were okay, but it appeared the child was already infected with the virus. Meanwhile, the director, still in the car, insisted they hurry up. The girl then picked up the child, insisting they needed to help. However, the director said there was no time for that. The child, seemingly about to transform into a monster, suddenly let out a scream. The girl became desperate as the child began lunging toward her. Jenny, watching everything unfold, tried to get out of the car. However, the man locked the door. Jenny asked why he did that, saying they needed to bring the girl inside. The director responded that it was too late. The girl had already been bitten. Moments later, the director sped off, leaving the girl behind. The scene transitions back to the present, where Jenny explains what happened. She admitted they left the girl behind and felt deeply regretful. She believed that if she had been more determined, she might have saved her companion. Samzik tried to comfort her, suggesting she have something to drink. But Jenny questioned if she deserved it, as she had left both the director and her companion to die. Samzik then asked if that was all she had to say, pointing out that they had all lost someone important. He added that he wasn't even sure if his mother was alive. The sheriff, annoyed, told Samzik not to say something he'd regret. Samzik continued, explaining that his mother had always been selfless, and they both knew it. However, selflessness had no place in this world. Still, he intended to honor her legacy by living a good life filled with smiles. That was how he found the strength to face each new day. For him, every day was like having his mother by his side, and he hoped his friends would remember him the same way and live long lives. That was why he wanted to exist for a little longer. Samzik handed Jenny the can of soda, telling her she needed to live for all her companions. It was her responsibility as a survivor. Hearing this, Jenny began to cry. She thanked him. The scene then cuts to the hospital from before, where Hyun appeared to be drinking something. He remarked on how awful he looked but said it didn't matter since he would be breaking any heart soon. He then lit a cigarette and thought about the 2 pharmacists from earlier. He mused about how he once thought zombies only existed in movies. Hyun picked up a bag and left the area. Climbing some stairs, he spotted more zombies. Observing them, he commented on how ugly they were. He mentioned he'd deal with them, but they'd have to wait until his arm felt better. The scene transitions to the two pharmacists again, who assumed Hyung was a zombie. However, it was revealed to be Hyung himself, who advised them to stay quiet unless they wanted to attract more zombies. The group apologized, saying he had scared them. Hyung dropped the bag and said he'd bring all the food they wanted, but they had to help him fix his shoulder. If they wanted to get out alive, it was necessary. He never moved his shirt, revealing his injury to the man. The scene shifts to the previous building, where another man asked if the idol was staying with them. He questioned how such a famous idol could remain there. In response, the girl smiled and said she'd make sure to follow their rules. The other guy, observing the girl, was mesmerized by her beauty. He greeted her, saying he'd do his best to get to know her. At that moment, the sheriff took the man's hand, saying he insisted on greeting him on her behalf. Simultaneously, a drop fell on Yu's head, revealing that rain was coming. Soon, it began raining all over the city. Yu, observing the situation, thought visibility would become denser with the rain. This would make moving around more difficult. Additionally, their last stockpile of supplies would last for 3 or 4 days. Because of that, he hoped the rain would stop so they could return to gather more food. Just then, the sheriff called Jenny, asking if she could come up for a moment. Shortly after, the girl climbed up to meet him. The sheriff said this was where she'd stay, pointing out that it was the best and most spacious spot on the second floor, initially planned as an office. Looking around, the girl said it was great, and the sheriff noted that the room even had windows on every wall, offering a wide view and good ventilation. However, the door was broken. The girl replied it wasn't a problem, saying it was already perfect. From that window, she could hear birds singing and enjoy a great view. She then looked down and asked if the sheriff had chosen the flowers below. He admitted he had, saying he thought they'd brighten her room. He added that it might be a bit old-fashioned, so she could toss them if she didn't like them. Jenny responded that wasn't the case and said the flowers were wonderful. Smiling, she thanked him for his kindness. The scene then cuts to another location where a building appears to be on fire with a group of zombies attempting to climb it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the building, a man armed with a weapon seemed to be observing the situation. Next to him was a group of people who appeared to be analyzing something. The scene shifts again to another location where a young man stood in the rain, commenting that he couldn't get used to the horrifying view. The perspective shifts once more, showing Hyung saying it wasn't the time to explain anything. He urged everyone to trust him and stay indoors, as the entire area was overrun with monsters. A subordinate asked if they should fetch food, but Hyung replied it wasn't necessary and that he'd handle it later. He also wondered aloud about what might happen that night. Soon after, an older man grabbed a tool and approached a monster. The creature screamed as it tried to escape its chains. The man remarked how the more he observed, the more fascinating the creature became. He questioned how it could still react to his presence without ears or eyes, suggesting it might be due to its sense of smell. Then he used a knife to sever the monster's nose. He challenged the creature to try finding him again. The scene cuts back to the protagonist group's building, where everyone else was asleep. You suddenly woke up, alarming the group, who wondered about the noise they'd heard. Soon after, everyone, including Jenny, got out of bed. You motioned for them to stay quiet as he listened to the sound. Shortly after, the group stepped outside the building, and you noted that the sound didn't seem far off, suspecting it might be a zombie. He was frustrated that it was happening on such a rainy night. Jenny turned on a flashlight but commented that the light wasn't strong enough to reach very far. Sanzi, observing the situation, said it was too dark, even for his eyes. Another man speculated that a zombie was likely caught in their trap and suggested leaving it there to avoid unnecessary risks that night. Suddenly, a roar came from the direction of the sound. The sheriff said that noise could attract more monsters to the area. Because of this, he suggested it was safer to eliminate the zombie before others arrived. Observing the situation, you thought that judging by the behavior of the monsters in the city's center, the sheriff's words made sense. However, the real issue was still the lack of visibility at that moment. At the same time, the group once again directed the flashlight downward. Samzik seemed to spot something, finding the zombie trapped in the trap, screaming incessantly. The scene cuts to you, saying they had located the zombie and would split up for the task. For that reason, 3 of them would descend and deal with the monster. With the flashlights, Jenny and another guy would stay to illuminate the path. Thus, if Jenny spotted any hidden zombies, she should blow the whistle as a signal. Afterward, the group prepared and started descending the stairs. They headed toward the creature, holding flashlights in their hands. You, observing the situation, estimated it was about 30 meters to the monster. Moreover, even though they had only seen one creature, there could be many more. Because of this, they couldn't lower their guard. At that moment, another creature appeared, running toward you. The sheriff noticed the situation and quickly prepared himself. He successfully struck the creature with a blow. The sheriff then told them to continue. Determined, the group continued moving toward the location. Samzik, looking around, said it didn't seem like there were any more monsters. Shortly after, the group looked back. They saw you, apparently with an injury on his leg. The sheriff asked what happened, and you responded that he had slipped and fallen into the trap. He added that it hurt a lot. You then got up, saying he thought he could at least move a little. However, the sheriff told him to stay put. They needed to stop the bleeding first. you remarked that the bandage was too tight, but the sheriff replied that it had to be tight to stop the bleeding. He instructed Samzik to stay with you while he personally dealt with the zombie. The scene cuts to the group returning to the building. Another girl asked you if he was hurt and how it had happened. You replied that it was just a scratch. However, the sheriff said it wasn't just a scratch and that it looked much worse. He approached you, asking him to lower his pants. He questioned how he expected them to see how bad the injury was with his pants in the way. In the situation, you protested, saying they still had medicine and that there was no need to see it. But with no choice, you reluctantly agreed. Looking to the side, you noticed Jane was still there. You said she shouldn't look and they should proceed. The group then removed Yu's pants. The sheriff commented that the injury didn't look good and was not a small scratch. Samzik said that instead of bandaging it earlier, they should have disinfected the wound first to prevent it from worsening. You insisted he was fine and that injuries like this usually healed in a few days. The sheriff rebandaged the wound, asking if he was trying to impress Jane or something like that. He added that the first aid they had applied was the best they could do for now. Samzik reassured you that he and the sheriff would fetch some medicine for him as soon as the sun rose. Hearing this, you thanked them. Time passed and the scene shifted to Jane getting out of bed. Soon after, she heard groaning. She found you apparently in a lot of pain. The sheriff also seemed to be in discomfort. Jane approached you, thinking his wound must be causing him a lot of pain as he had been tossing and turning all night. At that moment, the girl began singing. A flashback of the first time they met played, showing all the situations they had endured. It included the memory of watching her director being killed before her eyes. The scene returned to the present, with the girl still singing to you. Eventually, he fell asleep peacefully. The scene shifted again to another location where a soldier seemed to be trying to communicate with someone else. It is revealed that it was Jinwoo talking to Kim, saying that it was already time for his shift. Observing the situation, Jinwoo thinks that the area seemed very exposed to the main gate. For that reason, the light should be pointed elsewhere. With such a light, they could only see 50 meters ahead. Moreover, it consumed a lot of energy, and it wouldn't do anything to protect them against a horde of zombies. The machine gun in the other rear tower might be sufficient. However, if they were at the main entrance, he wouldn't be as worried, since most of the firepower was concentrated there. Shortly after, Kim notices Junwoo's concern and tells him they should try to relax occasionally. After all, they hadn't heard a single shot that day. Nevertheless, Junwoo says they are critically exposed on the flanks, and for that reason, if the monsters attacked, they would likely get caught off guard. However, Kim reassures him, saying he had checked the situation board before leaving the area. He mentions they had already killed 3,000 of them so far. He then asks Jinwoo how many people he thinks live within a 10-kilometer radius of that location. Jinwoo asks why he is suddenly asking about the local population. Kim explains that zombies needed something to get their zombie horde rolling, and it wasn't as if they were rising from graves or anything like that. Regardless of whether someone was dead or alive, zombies needed people to function. He mentions that he had scanned the area while flying there, and for that reason there probably weren't more than 3,000 citizens living in that small area. Hearing this, Jinwoo says he now understands. Kim then mentions that if he had known they would be in this situation, he would have unloaded the ammunition crates earlier. Confused, Jinwoo asks what he means, saying he really wants to know about this. Kim responds that he'll tell Jinwoo since they've already walked through fire together. Kim begins recounting a story from when he was as much a rookie as Jinwoo. He recalls they had a sergeant nearing retirement, and because of that, Kim was with that man during his last guard duty, one day before his discharge. Kim asks if Jinwoo knows what he was doing as the main gunner. The protagonist answers affirmatively, saying he must have been sleeping like someone he knew. Kim, noticing Jinwoo's remark, hesitates and asks if he's trying to imply something about him. Regardless, Kim continues the story, saying that while they were doing their tasks, the sergeant suddenly pulled a pickaxe out of his pack, and then began digging like a madman around the podium. Kim says he thought the man had celebrated a bit too early with the bottle, so he just stayed quiet and watched. Surprised, Jinwoo says the ammunition crate was probably buried there. Continuing the story, Kim responds that there were at least 2 ammo cans, and the surgeon had watched over them for a long time before finally removing them. Jinwoo is astonished, saying that 2 cans were too much, nearly 10,000 rounds. He questions where Kim thinks the surgeon had managed to find those crates. Kim admits it was hard to believe but warns Jinwoo not to tell anyone. He had only shared this with Jinwoo because he trusted him. Shortly after, Kim starts recalling another story. At the same time, Jinwoo hears a noise. He looks to the side, starting to smell blood. Desperate, Kim asks what Jinwoo is looking at and if there is something out there. He also asks Jinwoo not to scare him like that because he hates it when it happens. Kim assumes he is hearing something, speculating that the noise is from a distance. However, the fact that he can hear it at all suggests something significant. Immediately, Jinwoo draws his weapon, calling out to Kim. He announces that the monsters are coming. At that moment, the noise begins echoing throughout the area. A massive group of monsters appears. Kim quickly prepares a signal. He throws it out front. Seeing the situation, Jinwoo thinks that while their base might be large, there weren't enough people to defend it. He wonders why the zombies keep attacking this place relentlessly. Observing the situation, the soldiers announce that the group is a magnitude 5 horde. They start preparing to fire at the overwhelming number of creatures. Jinwoo appears increasingly desperate, questioning how many monsters there could possibly be this time. Starting to aim with his sniper rifle, Jinwoo estimates that the monsters are approximately 600 meters away. Shortly after, he notices someone atop the tower firing indiscriminately in the wrong direction. Observing the situation, Jinwoo realizes that person's poor aim wouldn't stop the advancing horde. With such a massive wave of monsters, staying there any longer would mean certain death. As a result, they had to retreat to the central base at the right location and time. Jinwoo quickly starts calculating, estimating that the first wave of zombies would take approximately 72 seconds to reach their location. On the other hand, moving the ammunition equipment would cut that time down by 16 seconds. It might even take longer since they needed to evacuate within a minute. Shortly after, Jinwoo starts a countdown while taking out as many monsters as possible. He firmly states that they must leave the area. He turns to Kim, insisting they retreat immediately. However, Kim seems unfazed, continuing to fire at the swarm. Frustrated, Jinwoo grabs Kim by his shirt, emphasizing that staying there is no longer an option. They need to get to safety as quickly as possible. Even then, Kim resists, demanding Jinwoo let go of him. As they glance to the side, they notice a group of monsters charging at one of their comrades. Kim quickly fires, successfully saving his fellow soldier. Looking back, Jinwoo calls out to Kim again. This time, Kim starts running, telling Jinwoo to do the same as an overwhelming number of monsters closes in on them. Suddenly, a voice shouts for them to duck, and someone begins firing at the advancing zombies. It's revealed that Jinwoo's group had already reached the area and was offering support. As Jinwoo observes, he notes that their frontline defense has been entirely overrun. Shortly after, the group manages to eliminate all the zombies in the immediate area. However, Jinwoo knows the battle isn't over. More monsters appear, forcing Jinwoo and his comrades to retreat behind a gate, which closes behind them. The group breathes a sigh of relief, having reached the main base. Still, there is no time to relax as the army mobilizes to defend the area. Jinwoo tells Kim they must move quickly, but Kim, exhausted, wants to rest. At that moment, a loud noise echoes through the base, prompting the group to rush to their positions. Meanwhile, Jinwoo lingers, questioning whether they could bring more ammunition crates. Kim replies that there's no time, but they could at least grab some magazines. Jinwoo laments their lack of mortars, helicopters, or any substantial support to aid in their defense. Kim explains it might be because they are near a nuclear power plant bogged down by bureaucracy. Jinwoo remarks that at least they weren't conserving ammunition, so they could continue shooting. Kim counters that this was merely a stroke of luck, calling it a fleeting dream. A soldier announces over the communication line that anyone with loaded weapons should proceed to the defensive perimeter. Soon after, another soldier approaches Jinwoo and Kim, asking what they're doing and reminding them to return to the perimeter. Meanwhile, the massive horde continues advancing toward the base. Jinwoo quickly readies himself to fire at the monsters. He is astounded, realizing the horde numbers in the tens of thousands. He calculates that, if this is true, each soldier would need to take down at least 40 zombies to eliminate the threat. Doubt creeps in as Jinwoo wonders if they can truly survive this ordeal. At that moment, the general orders them to start firing. An immense battle ensues, with chaos erupting throughout the area. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.